across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of unadulterated news, views, opinions you won't hear anywhere else, and ideas maybe you won't have heard anywhere else either. Rafe Harderman-Q is here with us this morning. We're going to go through the morning papers, many of which are, of course, dominated by one big story this morning, and that is Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin start talks for peace in Ukraine. It came out of the blue yesterday afternoon. Donald Trump, the hardest working man, I think, in any business that you want to name, whether it be showbiz, politics, business, whatever you like to call it. Donald Trump just has had an absolute whirlwind of a start as the 47th President of the United States of America. All of the usual suspects, of course, are running around like a headless chicken saying, this is all terrible, you can't appease a terrible man like Vladimir Putin. The point of the matter is surely this, that Donald Trump believes, like many of us, that war is a terrible thing and it can't go on forever and it somehow needs to come to an end. You may take the view that President Zelensky should be given billions and billions and billions and billions of pounds until we all run out of money and the stalemate continues for 15 years. I won't be one of those, but you can very happily disagree with me if you wish. 0344 499 1000. We'll get stuck into that story. There's many other stories, though, as well, to be getting on with, including the latest from the immigration disaster that is the Home Office, where we've got a failed asylum seeker who came here in 2011, has finally been granted permission to stay in this country. Why? Because she joined a Nigerian terror group and was seen basically marching around Trafalgar Square, threatening all kinds of things against the Nigerian government. It's now thought that it's too dangerous for her to return to Nigeria, even though she clearly only joined this organisation in order to stay in Britain. That is the state of affairs, I'm afraid. So after we've had chicken nuggets, llamas, Pakistani paedophiles, we've now got the Nigerian terror girl who's allowed to stay in Britain for the rest of the time. Because why? Because we just have to help her. Meanwhile, Lord Hermer is under even more pressure. It turns out this man has got about 7 strikes against him. There's going to be a cabinet reshuffle coming, which I don't dare say he will not survive. We'll bring you more on that, of course, as we go. Meanwhile, front of the Times, new towns inspired by the King will be built by British workers. Apparently, Sir Keir Starmer is going to set out plans for a dozen new towns with designs inspired by the King. But I'm going to ask you this question. Would you want to live in Starmar Town? You can imagine what it would be like. Rainbow crossings everywhere, llama pens. I mean, who knows? Cameras all over the place so you can't do anything more than 20 miles an hour. Starmer's version of life, I'm afraid, I don't want to live in. Thank you very much indeed. It's bad enough having him as Prime Minister. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Also, Rachel Reeves, by the way, latest story on her. In addition to trying to find out who leaked the story that she hasn't got any more money, she's removed some old masters from her office in Downing Street, paintings of David Lloyd George, paintings of Benjamin Disraeli, and various British monarchs, and she's had them all replaced by, guess what? Pictures depicting the lockdown. I mean, does that not tell you everything you need to know about this bunch of Philistines that have been put in charge of this country who don't know what they're doing? 0344 499 1000 is the number. 6 minutes past 6. Let's get it on. And a very good morning to you all. At least it's not raining this morning. Rafe, very good morning to you. Nice to see you here. Loads to talk about this morning. We'll be talking later on to all manner of guests about all manner of things. We're talking about Wokery doing a run out over in America. Could it happen here? Disney apparently has ditched their woke warnings. That's all good. Booze bans at the 2034 Saudi World Cup. But I guess we should start with Russia, should we not?
Indeed, definitely the biggest story of the week, I would say, is this huge seismic shift in America's policy towards Ukraine. Look, it's a bit of realpolitik here. There's a time to get real. I detest and loathe Putin, murderous dictator, but the reality is, you know, he wouldn't have invaded Ukraine had Trump been president over the last 4 years.
I think we can agree on that.
There's a reason that he didn't do this when Trump was in office. There's a reason that China didn't start flying over Taiwan when Trump was in office. And this is essentially America saying to the Europeans, look, we're more concerned with Asia. This is a war. People are dying. It's now gone into a stalemate. This is like trench warfare in World War I. All that's happening are people are dying. Nothing's moving. The idea that Ukraine is now going to somehow push Russia back is for the birds. It's time to stop deluding yourselves that this is winnable and face reality. It's a very harsh reality. My heart goes out to the Ukrainian people. But if Europeans, you remember, Russia has got an economy the size of Italy.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's a dying country economically.
Pretty soon we'll be joining them.
It's outperforming the whole of Europe in terms of defence and so forth.
Yeah.
We can't stop riding on the coattails of the Americans. This is our fault for not having our defences properly secure. We can't expect the Americans to do it. And I'm afraid the reality, as much as it was after the Second World War with Yalta, the reality is whether it's Stalin or Putin, they want to dominate and control their borders. And if you're not prepared to stand up to them at the beginning, you need to make these sorts of concessions.
And we weren't prepared to stand up to them in 2014, never mind at the beginning of this latest conflict, you know. And I've often said, and many people listening to this show and watching it this morning will agree, you know, we can't just continually give money. I mean, again, shortly before we were told we had no money left in the Treasury, Keir Starmer went out and promised another £3 billion to Vladimir Zelensky. And Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, was speaking last night saying, actually, the UK and Europe have given more money to Ukraine than America has. And so he feels that means that we have some kind of, you know, right to have a say in this issue. But, of course, Trump doesn't really care about the niceties of politics, does he? He just wants to end the war. He doesn't believe that war is a good thing. He thinks it's bad for business. He thinks it's bad for the economy. It's bad for people, you know, and so he wants it to end. And so all of these people, there was a lot of chin stroking and wailing and gnashing of teeth on Newsnight last night because all of their kind of BBC types were coming out and saying, you can't do business with Vladimir Putin. Well, what would they suggest? Just allowing the war to go on forever?
Yeah, well, I don't think you can do business with Putin, but the reality is European leaders couldn't get their act together in the early weeks and months of this war.
Yeah.
If they had done, you know, Russia was caught off guard so badly. It was stuck in the mud. It was in the mud. It didn't know what to do. It looked like Putin might even be toppled by his own people.
Yes.
That was a time where a concerted effort of money and weapons could have actually pushed the Russians back far enough, or even out of Ukraine altogether.
Yeah.
That great moment was lost due to the infighting and, as usual, people kicking the can down the road. It's on the Europeans, charge sheet that they didn't get that done. I don't like some of the things. I don't think Putin deserves an invitation to America.
No. Well, they're going to meet in Saudi Arabia, according to the Times.
But they've also talked about visiting each other's nations in addition to going to Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of stuff there that I'm not comfortable with, but undeniably he is the villain of all of this. But unfortunately, we are where we are, and there is no possibility, I think, of Ukraine coming out of this. And even the Biden administration knew that there would need to be territorial concessions. But the fact that no one's been willing to say this until now shows you how weak our leaders are. And you're quite right. 2008, Putin went into Georgia. No one said anything. 2014, into Crimea. This is the politics of appeasement again. We need to stand up to bullies from the outset, but we're in the situation that we created ourselves.
Yeah, exactly right. President Zelensky quoted in the Times this morning saying that he had a call from Donald Trump after Trump spoke to Putin and had a meaningful conversation, saying they talked about opportunities to achieve peace and discussed our readiness to work together at team level. A lot of people also talking about whether Ukraine should be invited into NATO, and many fear that if that was the case, then there really would be a problem.
Yeah, well, I think one criticism I do have over this is, yes, we all knew that America was never going to allow Ukraine into NATO, but there was no need to say it now. That should have been a negotiating tactic.
Yeah.
Keep that for when you're discussing with Putin and say, OK, well, we'll block the thing
about Trump,
NATO.
though,
no need to come out and say it out at the beginning. I think that was a bit of a mistake.
The thing with Trump, though, is that he negotiates in the open air, doesn't he? He doesn't actually negotiate in
this
in
is
meetings.
Not much of a negotiation. This seems to be more of a concession at the beginning.
Let's just get it sorted, I think. And I mean, he's constantly moving the goalposts, so you never quite know what he's going to do next. And that's why I think he's been successful so far in the less than face it, a month of the first month of his tenure has been quite extraordinary, hasn't it? Absolutely amazing. Let's have a look, actually, since we're talking about Donald Trump, at Caroline Leavitt, who's fast becoming the sort of heroine of modern-day politics. She's, of course, the press secretary in the White House. Yesterday, she was asked a question about whether it was fair that some press had been banned from the Oval Office on the grounds that they didn't want to call the Gulf of America the Gulf of America. Have a look.
If we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the Geographical Identification Name Server, and Apple has recognized that, Google has recognized that, pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America, and it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world.
And there you have it. Apparently the Associated Press want to still call it the Gulf of Mexico. And so, as she said, therefore, you know, we don't recognise you. That's it. Thank you. Good night.
She's tremendous, isn't she? I mean, I wish we had somebody with that sort of ability on this side of the ocean.
I know.
It's funny that I saw yesterday, if you look on Google Maps and you're in America, it says Gulf of America.
Yeah.
If you're in Mexico, it still says Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
But if you're in this country, typical undecided English people, it says both Gulf of America and then in brackets Gulf of Mexico.
I don't know why people get
so.
I don't know why people get so worked up. I said this at the time when he decided to rename it. You know, we call it the English Channel. The French don't call it that. They call it the Sleeve. You know, so there are already bodies of water which have got two names.
And
what's the big deal?
Falkland Islands, Malvinas.
The Malvinas. You know, what's the big deal? You know, but people get their knickers in a hell of a twist about this stuff. Let's move on to something slightly less international. It's still international, but the failed asylum seeker story, the front page of the Telegraph, in addition to what they've got on Russia, this extraordinary story about a Nigerian woman who can't be named, apparently, who tried and failed 8 times to secure asylum in Britain, has been finally granted the right to stay because she joined a terrorist organisation, basically just so that she could boost her right to be here.
I mean, what a mockery. Imagine joining a terrorist organisation.
So that's all right, then.
Is a way you can end up staying here. I mean, this just shows you what an absolute, disgrace the human rights and legal migration system is in this country. This woman claimed 8 times.
Yes.
And 7 of those times her claims were rejected.
Yes.
It's almost like she's going through her top trumps.
Yeah.
And she's saying, right, now I'm going to claim that, I've got a right to a family life.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to claim I'm a victim of trafficking. No, that hasn't worked.
She ran
now
through
I'm going to
the
get political asylum.
Yeah.
That didn't work.
Right.
Now she's doing... I'm surprised she hasn't said that she's a lesbian.
Well, that would have been the next move, I suppose, or a Christian or something like that, so that she might be persecuted in her home country. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. She joined this organisation called the IPOB, Indigenous People of Biafra, which, of course, has probably got headquarters somewhere in Lambeth, you would imagine, right? And these people march around, apparently are a danger and have been declared a terrorist organisation by the Nigerian government. Even knowing that she joined them deliberately in order just to be unsafe if she went back to Nigeria, they still grant her asylum. It just beggars belief. I mean, this is in the same week we've had the chicken nuggets, as I said, the Pakistani paedophile who can't be sent home because he needs to see his children. We've got, the llama stuff. It just is a mad week, isn't it, once
quite
again?
Literally every single day this is coming out, and it just shows how urgently we need to reform our system and also the judiciary, because this is about judges creating these ridiculous new laws. This is not what the European Convention on Human Rights was supposed to do, but you don't even need to go that far. No. Just repeal the Human Rights Act that was put in, and then we don't have to really follow the ECHR. No. It's the Human Rights Act that binds us into all of this. This was a piece of legislation from the Labour Party when they were last in office. Why the Tories didn't simply get rid of this? Because that Human Rights Act has hamstrung so many of their efforts over the past 14 years. Why they haven't done it, I don't think there's much hope of the Labour Party doing it, but they really need to do it because it's simply, being abused now by the judiciary to advance their own left-wing agenda. Because we have to remember, the lawyers of today are not the lawyers when we were growing up. We were all told that judges were, far right and out of touch. Yeah. Now they've gone right to the other end of the spectrum.
I don't know. Well, we'll come back to that Gaza judge in a minute because we've got another story here in the Telegraph. Britain needs you if you are a DJ, a dog walker, or a yoga teacher. Right. This is the new, basically, categories of overseas workers eligible to apply for UK skilled worker visas. Home Office data has revealed that over the 3 years to March 2024, 334 visas were granted for animal care service occupations, which include dog groomers, dog walkers, stable hands, kennel assistants and veterinary nursing assistants. Over the same period, 167 fitness and wellbeing instructors, Pilates and yoga teachers and lifestyle coaches got in. I mean, I don't know what you would have to do to convince anybody in the Home Office that you're a lifestyle coach. I suspect very little. I mean, you and I could just turn up and go, what do you do? I'm a lifestyle coach. OK, you can come in. What do you have to do to prove that you're a lifestyle coach?
Well, and you can just, is this why we're having lots of people coming in from Bangladesh and Pakistan
Probably.
Now? Because they're all
lifestyle coaches,
and
yoga
dog walkers. Yeah. I mean, when you think about skilled employees coming in, you're thinking about plumbers, maybe. Yeah. You're thinking about engineers, doctors, and all of this.
Architects.
But now they've even got historical costume interpreters. Those people who dress up outside museums as Anne Boleyn or Henry VIII.
Oh
that apparently is an essential service, and it also includes air travel assistants, the people who put your luggage into the little size guide when you're getting on board a plane. It's just a complete mockery. homeopaths as well. I mean, the thing doesn't... There's no...
How about sociopaths and psychopaths? We've got a few of those as well.
And we now, of course, know from the OBR statistics that only 1 in 20 immigrants to this country is a high-skilled net contributor. The majority of immigrants who are coming here are low-skilled. They're not contributing to our economy. And when you see the categories of skill, there's no surprise.
A government spokesman, when asked to comment on these findings that were discovered over the course of the last few days, says, "We are grateful for the work skilled international professionals do in the UK." Really?
I mean, I have a friend who, you know, no insult to dog walkers, but I have a friend who didn't know what to do in his life. He ended up walking dogs.
Right.
I'm sure we have enough people here who are on benefits.
I've got nothing
who can easily do that job.
I've got nothing against dog walkers. I just don't think we need to import them, for heaven's sake. Absolutely unbelievable. We'll come back to more from the Telegraph and more from other newspapers as well. We'll have a few clips coming up from Prime Minister's questions yesterday, because the Gaza story is the one we want to get stuck into. This is the one that came out yesterday, where a judge, an immigration tribunal judge, ruled that a family from Gaza could come and live in Britain because they could use the Ukrainian refugee law to basically settle here, because they've got members of their family that are already here. Extraordinary stuff. Nobody can seem to work out exactly who's telling the truth. It's definitely not Keir Starmer, though. Let's get a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. Just putting the TV on yesterday, and some BBC plank woman was on there yesterday, and she was going on about, oh, most of the immigrants are all skilled workers. Skilled in what? I tell you what, perhaps they're good, Mike, at making chicken nuggets. There's a thought, eh, Mike? Have a great show, Mike.
James, thank you very much indeed. That may well be, hasn't been put down as a specific category, but chicken nugget manufacturer might well get you into the country. I wouldn't be at all surprised. It's 19 minutes past 6. Back with more with Rafe and I after this.
Well, this whole nonsense over and Article 8 is one of the most ridiculously overused and overinterpreted articles in the concept of standing up for people's human rights. We all want to stand up for their human rights to protect them, but not to say to them, look, you can come over here under a scheme that was never designed for you in the first place, but designed very specifically, and it couldn't be more specific in the naming of the country. That it was for you, but this is really, I think we're heading for a massive clash now over the convention.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
22 minutes past 6, I'm Mike Graham. Welcome back to Morning Glory. 4 glorious hours of the greatest breakfast show in the history of broadcasting. Good morning, Mike, says Sharon. David Lammy gave Ukraine $55 million last week. This government is happy to dish out taxpayers' money, yet are not willing to pay waspy women money they worked for and are entitled to, says Sharon from Staffordshire. And Tony says this, Mike, President Trump has sent auditors to Kiev to find the missing $100 billion. I mean, there's an awful lot of questions about that, which I'm sure we'll come back to, Rafe, in a moment. Let's move on, though, to Prime Minister's questions yesterday. Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer going at it over the story about this tribunal judge, this immigration judge, who ruled that basically anybody can come to this country from any part of the world as long as they've got some form of relative living here. And, of course, Gaza being at the centre of all of this at the moment created an awful lot of controversy because, as I said yesterday, apart from anything else, how would you know that anybody coming from Gaza wasn't a member of Hamas? Here's Kemi Badenoch.
This case has arisen because a Palestinian came to the UK from Gaza in 2007. He is now a British citizen. This is precisely why we need to break the conveyor belt from arriving in the UK to acquiring indefinite leave to remain and then a British passport and now a right to bring 6 family members here as well.
They presided over record high levels of immigration. Reached nearly 1 million. It was a one-nation experiment in open borders. And she was the cheerleader. She was the one campaigning for more people to come and thanking her own side when they supported her campaign. So before she lectures us, I think she needs to reflect on her own record and her own record here.
He doesn't like answering questions, does he, Keir Starmer? Later on in their exchange, of course, it turns out that he made a mistake, or I don't know whether he made a mistake or he told a lie about the fact that this Gaza procedure was a law that was enacted under the Conservative government, when in fact it wasn't.
Well, it's not so much the law, it's in terms of this hearing.
Yeah.
So the hearing in which this chap was given, the family of 6 were given the right, it started under the Tories, but the actual crucial hearing that made this decision actually happened now under this current administration. Right. So it's a plague on both their houses. Yeah. And it's undeniable that the reason this was even possible by the courts is because it was the legislation from which this was interpreted was very loosely drafted. It was a very poorly written piece of legislation which does need to have the loopholes tied up. But watching these two, it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Two sides of the same useless coin when it comes to immigration.
Well, that's right. I mean,
and it just goes to show how difficult it is actually for Kemi to attack the Labour Party on immigration, given that they are responsible for actually the unprecedented rise in immigration that we've seen.
But that is the problem.
Supported it.
That is the problem. And of course, John Rentoul yesterday fact-checked this whole situation. He said the Prime Minister said the decision in Gaza versus Ukraine case was taken under the last government, under the legal framework of the last government. The decision was actually published on the 28th of January this year. So as you say, they're both kind of right and they're both wrong, in a strange sort of way. But you're right. I mean, they're sort of, it's like the two bald men fighting over a comb, isn't it? They're both useless at immigration control, and neither one of them are doing anything really to stop it. Kemi Badenoch says she now wants to stop it after being in a government that for 14 years just increased it ridiculously all the time. And you just kind of despair, really, don't you? Well, but Keir Starmer does seem to be very cavalier with the truth for somebody who claims to be a stickler for the rules and the law.
Well, when it suits his agenda, it's funny how quick he is to actually put aside his principles.
Sorry, what principles are those? Have you spotted any?
His professed principles, as Groucho Marx said, these are my principles, if you don't like them, I've got others.
Yeah, exactly right.
But yeah, look, this goes back to judicial reform again, because now it turns out that the judge who made this ridiculous decision, reinterpreting the Ukrainian refugee settlement scheme in entirely the way it was not intended to be interpreted. His father is actually a very well-known left-wing journalist who's been hugely critical of Israel and pro-Palestinian. And it just goes to show, not only the bias that exists in our judiciary, clearly, but also the amount of power they've managed to accrue since the time of Tony Blair.
Well,
they've taken power from the people in terms of taking power from Parliament. They're creating laws through precedent which were never intended by any democracy, and it just needs to be taken into hand because the values of them don't align with the values of the people, and yet they are increasingly dictating the path of direction for this country.
Well, this is it. I mean, I was having conversations yesterday about this, where we seem to have now a judiciary who have become politicised and have been for some time, as you quite rightly say. But basically, they're making decisions which affect the future of this country. They're making decisions which affect the sort of present-day problems that we've got, and they're controlling whatever seems to be our immigration policy, such as it is.
Well, and let's be clear here. What this decision does, it creates a legal precedent that could open the floodgates for anyone fleeing war-torn situations to come to this country. And let's remember, there's a reason that, you know, people often say that Gaza is an open-air prison. Well, prisons have 4 walls. One of those walls is with Egypt. There's a reason that the Egyptians haven't opened that wall and allowed Palestinians in, because they know the huge security threat that will pose to the nation. That's why Jordan also was, you know, shocked by Trump's announcement that he wants Palestinians to go to Jordan. You know, in 1992, the Danish government had 321 Palestinian refugees coming into the country. But 30 years later, it transpired that 64% of them got a criminal record, 34% of their kids had criminal records too, and a majority of them were on benefits, right? We need to realise the type of people...
It's absolutely ridiculous,
and we can't do any checks on them. The reason we had a Ukrainian scheme and a Hong Kong scheme is because we understood the type of people we will be bringing over. We can't do any of that when it comes to Palestine.
No, exactly right. And of course, many of the Hong Kong people were coming here to be residents, but the Ukrainians were coming here to be temporary residents, which is a very different thing. Which brings us on, though, again, to sort of some of these dangerous decisions, some of these dangerous people in government. The I newspaper this morning on the front page is saying that there's a government reshuffle coming, which might be curtains for old Lord Harmer, as I like to call him, the Attorney General. There's a great piece in the Times which talks about the 7 reasons why Harmer is in a bad place with the government. One of them is a podcast that he used to do when he was at Matrix Chambers, which of course is that human rights legal organisation. From 2020 to 2024, he hosted a series of podcasts, basically, in which he expressed his views on a wide variety of subjects, including these, where he said pledges to control our borders are dehumanising, so he doesn't think we should be doing it. He also argued that there is a moral argument for Britain to pay reparations for slavery, and he also called Donald Trump the orange tyrant. So you know the sort of people you're dealing with here. I don't think he survives a reshuffle, this guy, and neither should he.
No, this man needs to go. I tweeted on this just a few days ago. This man is the first Attorney General in a century not to have served in Parliament. Keir Starmer parachuted in his far-left radical buddy. And the Attorney General we have is working actively and has worked actively against the British national interest. He represented Jerry Adams. Against victims of IRA bombings. He's represented...
Shamima Begum, I think,
right? he advocated for. He also advised the Caribbean countries on how to get reparations from this country. This man actively hates Britain. He said that the legacy of the British Empire is a legacy of violence that all kids must be taught, ignoring all the benefits that the British Empire brought to the world. Why is this man in government? He is just sort of, you know, he is symbolic of the type of mentality that pervades, unfortunately, the corridors of power right now.
He does, absolutely right. The left-wing lawyers who seem to have taken over the country. I don't know how we'd let it happen. Coming up, we're going to talk about David Amess and his killer. Front page of The Guardian, the government's Prevent scheme made a series of errors in its handling of the man who went on to murder Conservative MP David Amess. We'll be talking to David Amess's daughter, Katie Amess, later on in the next hour of the show. Also, of course, we might make an honourable mention to my Lord Carlile, who famously came onto this show and sang the praises of Prevent and said, you know, they do a very good job most of the time. Well, once again, Lord Carlile, if you're listening, I'm sure you're not, you got it wrong. I'll accept your apology any time. It's coming up to 6:31. Loads more after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 6:34. We're here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewitt will be here. Rafe Hardemain-Koo is here, broadcaster and commentator. We've got a good one for you in a moment about Rachel Reeves and some old masters. But before that, let's talk about Prevent once more. The government's Prevent scheme made a series of errors in its handling of the man who went on to murder Conservative MP David Amess, Ali Harbi Ali. Once again, referred to Prevent in 2014 by his school, but basically his case was closed because they didn't think he was a danger to anyone.
Yeah, you know, people who refer to Prevent, I think we need to refer Prevent to someone as well, to look into them, because it's absolutely disgraceful now. These are sort of 3 occasions now where we're having issues with regards to Prevent in close succession. You know, the government has now announced an inquiry into the Nottingham murders, but also we've had an inquiry...
I mean, that one doesn't actually involve Prevent, but it's the same issue, isn't it?
Well, we've had the Prevent is going to be looked into in terms of Axel Rudakabana.
Yeah.
You know, the daughter of Sir David Amess quite rightly says, well, look, this is the same issue pertaining to the murder of my father. Surely if you're going to have an inquiry into what happened in Southport, you need to have an inquiry into how it was that this chap who murdered my father was seen for one meeting only, and that was at McDonald's of all places.
Right.
And on the basis of this quick meeting in McDonald's, they made the life-changing decision for the Amess family that this guy was not a threat, as if someone doesn't necessarily want to be open about the truth when you speak to them about this sort of a thing.
Yeah.
You have to understand, you know, you need to do a lot more investigation into somebody. Lessons need to be learned. We say that far too often. Sir William Shawcross did a major review into Prevent, and he found out that it wasn't fit for purpose in a huge number of areas, particularly, for example, in its completely unjust equation of the far right, the supposed far right, with Islamist extremism.
They've got that massively wrong,
we know that 94% of deaths from terrorism in this country have been due to Islamic extremism, and I'm afraid too often they're focusing on the wrong things. They're focusing on people who have been talked about as being far right, perhaps for watching Michael Portillo's train journeys, perhaps for liking the Antiques Roadshow, and at the same time they are diverting resources and attention away from where it should be, and that's people like this.
Yes, again, you know, the wokists kind of leading us down the wrong path and putting people in danger, and mortal danger, in fact, and causing people to die, which is absolutely unforgivable. And it's no longer, I don't think, it should be about, you know, oh, we got this one a bit wrong. It's about, as you say, the whole organisation being completely and utterly riddled with lefties who think that the best thing to do is to pat people on the back who have come here from foreign countries and say, you're fine, you carry on doing what you're doing, instead of actually, I mean, one of the things I was listening to yesterday, they said, well, the problem is there's thousands and thousands of these radicalised Muslim potential terrorists. Well, maybe you should have attached that problem with a bit more importance and work out why there are so many of them here, and if they are here, then kick them out.
There are 43,000 people on the terrorist watch list, of whom around 90% are Islamist extremists.
I mean, that's enough to fill a football stadium.
That's almost half the size of our full-time regular British army. You know, we have more people on the terror watch list here than there were Hamas fighters on the eve of October the 7th.
Unbelievable.
More even than there were members of ISIS during the Iraq offensive of 2014. This is a serious issue, particularly when you look at projections for population growth in this country. 1 in 100 Muslims in this country is on the terror watch list. With population growth forecast the way that it will be, by 2050 there will be 150,000 people on this terror watch list, if we're going to go by that 1 in 100 statistic. This is serious stuff. There'll be more on the watch list than the size of the entire army in 25 years. Nothing has been done to tackle that. Instead, we have an organisation like Prevent, which isn't fit for purpose and makes a mockery of any attempt to get a grip with this.
Exactly ridiculous, Rachel Reeves now, looking pretty miserable in the Daily Mail. Page 8, tax fears after £10 billion is wiped from Reeves's coffers. This is a warning from the Office for Budget Responsibility, who have basically downgraded its UK growth outlook, meaning nearly £10 billion in headroom is likely to be wiped out. The bad news for us, of course, is that she's remaining in the office of Chancellor. There's not much chance of her being kicked out by Keir Starmer, apparently, in the reshuffle. But basically, it probably also means that she's going to put up taxes. You know, but her main concern in all of this is to find the person that leaked the OBR report, because she's worried that it's bad for her reputation.
Yes, we can't have the public finding out the truth.
No, God,
we must ensure that we find and penalise the person. Look, she has staked her entire reputation, and indeed her entire government's reputation, on the pursuit for growth. And the fact that, you know, the Bank of England has halved its growth expectations is not good news for them. There's always been some wiggle room, you know, in the
they call it headroom, don't they?
Yeah, some headroom that they can use as wiggle room. And there is none of that now. This is a desperate time. Tax rises, it seems to me, are the only other option, because you can't cut that much spending. And productivity is still a huge thing. The Labour Party is going to experience just what the Tory Party did. There is no way you can deal with things like pay rises for the public sector and hope to get your finances in control. So the Labour Party is going to experience huge strikes this year and next year from doctors and the health service and others, because they can only guarantee at least a 4% rise at the maximum. And that's going to cause huge upset for them in the months to come from their normally loyal voters.
Exactly right. And more amusingly, I suppose, or tragically, if you like, depending on your point of view, on page 3 of the Telegraph, Rachel Reeves swaps old masters for COVID angst. She, believe it or not, this is after having replaced a load of pictures before in number 11 Downing Street, because she wanted pictures of either women doing things or women who had painted them. And I think I'm right in saying, you'll remember the name better than me, I'm sure, did she not replace a picture of Margaret Thatcher with a picture of some communist person who marched down from the northeast of England to London back in the 1920s? But anyway, she's now removed famed male predecessors, David Lloyd George and Benjamin Disraeli, portraits of both of them, who ran the Treasury before leading the country. Portraits of monarchs have disappeared, and she's replaced them with, believe it or not, pictures depicting the lockdown.
Yes.
I mean, seriously?
As if Britain wasn't depressing enough to be in right now. You need to actually take off some lovely, beautiful old masters and replace them with paintings reminding us of the most awful time in recent history. You know, this is just yet more evidence of this woman's thinking. It's putting identity politics before British heritage, before just an appreciation of art and the things that are beautiful in this world. What really gets me, though, is that she's actually got a model of Millicent Fawcett, the suffragist leader.
Yes.
Now, Millicent Fawcett was a rabid free marketeer supporting her husband. She didn't want any free primary school education. She didn't believe in free school meals. And in fact, when she gave Vauxhall Park to the nation, the Labour Party knocked down her husband's statue because they thought she was such an anti-Labour person. Goes to show the limited thinking and knowledge of people in number 11.
But the picture that they've also used, or apparently that she's used, is a picture by somebody called Donna Coleman, COVID Anxiety 5, brackets mask disorder. I'm just going to hold it up so you can see it. It's basically a big red blob. I mean, that's it.
I mean, that's the sort of painting I would refer the artist to prevent myself.
Yeah, you'd go,
when I see that.
Is this the work of a mad schizophrenic? I mean, absolutely. So portraits of King James II, James I, David Lloyd George, busts of Charles James Fox, Benjamin Disraeli, and also a rather pleasant picture of Sarah Churchill, Duchess of Marlborough. It's just this kind of revolutionary sixth form attitude, isn't it? That, you know, up the people. It's like Citizen Smith, you know, power to the people, boys and girls. Sorry, just girls. We don't want any of our history because that's all bad, nasty, misogynistic, empire-driven tosh.
Exactly. But what I do love is that she's got a watercolour of agricultural labourers in headcalf sowing potatoes, which, you know, I'm sure the farmers will love, having just had their tractors down Whitehall. That's okay, because you've got a picture of some potato planters.
Absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? Incredible stuff. Coming up, we've got more to do. We're going to talk about the wokists. We've got a clip from Nigel Farage for you on woke spending. We're going to be talking about what is going on in Keir Starmer's head. He wants to build some new towns in his own image, right? But I want you to help me out here. I want you to give me some ideas as to what would be in Starmer Town. I'm already assuming there's going to be loads and loads of rainbow crossings for people to walk across the road, loads of 20-mile-per-hour signs. There'll be lots of ULEZ charges, presumably, and also, don't forget, plenty of closed-circuit TV, loads of CCTV to catch you out doing all manner of things. And also, there'll be presumably at least one llama pen, won't there, for the people who work for the NHS. Let's get a voice note from Trevor.
Hi Mike, Trevor here from Norwich, just listening to your fantastic show on the way into work, as I do always. Keep up the great work. Just a quick comment with regards to Prevent. It's starting to sound to me as if the whole of Prevent is permeated and riddled with DEI. Therefore, when they have suspects that are non-white, they're treating these people with kid gloves. They get referred because they're dangerous, and then the DEI people come in and say, well, I don't know, you know, is this just because we're racist? Sounds like that's the case to me, mate.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there, Trevor. That is the problem. But we find that this judicial system of ours is similarly riddled with those kind of people, as is the judicial, the front end of the judicial system, i.e. the police forces of this country and organisations like Prevent. I've never understood the point of it, given that it's also a voluntary organisation. So if you don't voluntarily agree to go along with whatever it is that they want to do with you, you don't actually have to do anything at all. 0344 499 1000 is the number to send those voice notes to via WhatsApp. Morning, Mike, says Michael in Birchington, Kent. Great show as usual, compulsive viewing. When MPs and Lords enter Parliament, they take an oath of allegiance to the monarch. Perhaps some should be taken to court for breaking their oath. Well, I think that's a very good point. We'll get into that coming up later on in the show. More from myself and Rafe, though, coming up next right here on Morning Glory. You know, maybe we should rebrand Paddington Bear as an illegal migrant. You know, so what you do is you take out the clothes that he's got now. You get him a puffer jacket.
Yes.
That's what they get when they arrive.
North Face.
Give him a machete.
Zombie knife, maybe.
Zombie knife, yeah. Put him up in a hotel, maybe somewhere.
Not that hat. A baseball cap backwards.
Baseball cap backwards. Yeah. Put him somewhere in a hotel in the centre of a town he's never been in before.
Some Reebok trainers.
Yeah, some Reebok trainers. Give him a credit card so he can buy stuff if he needs to, cigarettes, you know, that kind of thing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:47. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Rafe Holman-Menku is here, broadcaster and commentator. Let's talk about the wokery that's going on at the moment, because while Britain still seems to be mired in quite a bit of it and quite a bit of this DEI type relationship. We've got to say that Trump is kind of cutting through with a swathe all the way through every single piece of DEI. And the thing that's really struck me is how fast the American big companies have just kind of turned tail and gone, actually, we're just going to do away with that, almost as if they didn't believe in it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, DEI is the biggest case of emperor's new clothes ever.
Yeah.
And all it takes is someone to stand up and point out that there are no clothes. Trump has done that. You know, we look across the ocean green with envy to see the speed with which they're reversing the sort of long march through the institutions.
Yeah.
Remember, woke is an American invention. It was started there. Right. They were infected first. They've now come out of that infection. Let's just hope that we're actually also going to be
enough, yes. I was with Jeremy Kyle yesterday on his show, and he was saying that he is of the understanding that we are like the beginning of the Biden 4-year cycle, and that 4 years from now we'll be ready to replace whatever it is we've now got with somebody like Trump. And maybe that person could be Nigel Farage. Here's what he had to say about woke spending yesterday.
You have to remember that Prevent is a scheme.
Do you ever wonder where your taxes go and whether your money is being spent properly? Well, have a look at what's come across my desk. Oh, you'll like this. The environmental impact of filmmaking using Star Wars to improve sector sustainability practices. Now, I'm not even making it up. Over £200,000. Try this. The cultural legacies of the British Empire. Classical music's colonial history, 1750 to 1900, 1.2 million, funded by UK Research and Innovation, a non-departmental government body. When you see what they're doing in America, do you get the feeling we ought to be doing it here? This is all a complete waste of your taxpayer money. It's keeping people in jobs who don't deserve to have them. This is the first in a series of these.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it looks as though even Ben and Jerry's have now been told that they have to calm it down and rein it in. We've got accountancy firms all over the place. Deloitte has told employees to strip gender pronouns from their emails. He, him, she, her, they, them. Goldman Sachs has ditched its own diversity rules that banned it from advising on company listings of firms that had all-male, all-white boards. And so, you know, it's gone full circle. The big consultancy company Accenture, I mentioned this yesterday, have sunsetted, their word, not mine, the whole DEI idea. And it just goes to show you that they never really wanted to do it in the first place. Now they're doing it because they want to get government contracts. Well, they can also see the problems it's caused in terms of professionalism. You know, they've prioritised identity over excellence and competence. Yeah. And that's the problem. And they, you know, these are businessmen ultimately, and they can see the impact it's having on their businesses to pursue DEI policies. Unfortunately, you know, you say Deloitte has removed all the gender pronouns. Not in this country, unfortunately. Here, they're still being advised to keep it here. Right. But it is beginning to have, you know, you had people in the city calling for a bonfire of DEI stuff. What I love, though, is, you know, even Google's head of diversity has now changed her LinkedIn title to Googler Engagement. So it is actually, it's glorious to see. Well, it is good to see. And the Mail have got a version of that as well. Disney is now ditching its woke warnings because, if you remember, they were putting all sorts of trigger warnings on films like Peter Pan and Dumbo and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was as if they had to rename them. In fact, did they not try and remake Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs without any dwarfs in it? Yes, because that one dwarf from Game of Thrones said that was terrible, and all the other dwarfs said, that's our one chance at a job. You've just taken from us. You've just taken it from us. But at the same moment, we mentioned this yesterday, Channel 4 has now started putting trigger warnings on Father Ted, which just goes to show you there is this contrast now between the US, who are returning to normal. Jungle Book was slapped with a long warning which said this: this film includes negative depictions and or mistreatment of people or cultures. These stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. Well, not anymore, apparently. Now they're fine again. Yeah, I mean, we're going to look back on this. For God's sake. In 10, 20 years, we're going to look back on this as being one great sort of period of complete insanity. Right. You know, Milton Friedman famously said, the only focus of any business is the pursuit of profit. Well, for the first time in history, we've had companies pursuing ideology at the expense of profit and of its shareholders. Absolutely. It's been complete lunacy. Indeed. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia, though, because Donald Trump's apparently upset the Saudis. Not Donald Trump, sorry, Benjamin Netanyahu's upset the Saudis by saying maybe we could move Palestine into Saudi Arabia. They've got plenty of room there, so they didn't respond too well to that. But the head of the country and the country's sporting activities, I think, has been speaking about the 2034 World Cup, which is taking taking place there. There's going to be a booze ban, apparently. And he's saying, what's wrong? Can't you go 5 minutes without a drink?
Well, not if you're English, you can't. No European teams and fans can go 5 minutes without a drink during the World Cup. On the one hand, it's great to see Saudi Arabia actually saying something like, this is our own culture, and we don't change our culture for other people. Now, if only we had said that in this country.
I know.
If we were brave enough to say that. Unfortunately, all the times to have a battle is on alcohol, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, it's okay for countries in the Middle East to say it. It's okay for countries in the Far East to say it, but it's not any good for people in the West to say it.
But it just goes to show how corrupt the international football is. It was obvious from the outset that Saudi Arabia was not a great place to have it. The expense and in terms of carbon footprint, all the air conditioning you need for these stadiums and everything else. But they promised that they were going to have alcohol when they put their bid in for the World Cup. They said we'll have special tents.
Right.
You can have to police it, but it will be there. Don't worry. And now, as we all expected, they've actually reversed on that issue. So I don't know whether anyone's going to actually go from England because the idea that a bunch of English chaps can last the World Cup without a drink.
Because we had the same situation in Qatar, right? When Qatar won, I mean, it was actually worse, really, in a way, because Qatar had no footballing history whatsoever. Saudi doesn't have much footballing history, but at least it has a footballing league now with people like Ronaldo playing it. So they've actually got some localised football stadiums that are already there. But the thing is that Qatar was meant to be a place where you couldn't get a drink, and then they sort of set up 1 or 2 fan zones where I think you could
in hotels
in very limited ways, and you were only allowed to have like 2 pints at a time or something like that. And people did go, but not in many numbers from Europe, I don't think.
Yeah, that's just it. Not many people are going to go, and even those few that were going to go are now going to be put off rather by it. But we'll see. It's 2034. We'll see if they really can see how embarrassing it's going to be with, rows and rows empty.
Yeah.
They might have to suddenly make a concession on that front.
But, I mean, this is the weird thing about the way that sport is going now. When Saudi put on that Saudi season, Riyadh season, I think it was called, when they had the Tyson Fury fight at Wembley. And in addition to somebody singing the British national anthem, there's somebody singing the Saudi national anthem, which, I mean, I'm sorry, it did look a bit incongruous given that it was happening in North London.
Well, they've also said that the Saudi government is desperate to sports watch. We have talk about BP greenwashing, but basically because of its appalling human rights record, it's trying to get a better profile abroad. But we also need to have discussions about the Qataris, how much they own of this country. The influence of these very extremist, very radical governments, in this country is cause for concern and cause for alarm, especially when they get their teeth into much-loved international sporting fixtures.
Well, this is the thing. And going back just to more domestic matters, let's talk about the Keir Starmer home building plan. Prime Minister will reveal 100 areas across England have applied to build towns of more than 10,000 people as he vows to take on the NIMBYs and the blockers. The one thing you know about Keir Starmer is whatever he's vowing to do, he won't do. So he's basically saying about a dozen areas are expected to be chosen in this summer, with Starmer having indicated that he wants construction underway before the end of the Parliament. Now, Jackie Smith has already come out and given an interview a couple of days ago to say we don't have enough construction workers in this country to build all of these homes that Angela Rayner wants to build. So basically, we're not going to hit any of the targets. Starmer's now saying that he wants the home builders and the home building companies to train construction workers. So we're talking a very long way off here, I think, aren't we?
And that's the problem with this Labour government. Firstly, we were told that we weren't going to have people making promises and then not delivering, as we saw under the Tories. But I'm afraid all the things that they've put forward, from Heathrow expansion and everything else, these are all things that are going to be years in the future. The economy needs a short, quick injection of something in this economy that will actually get things moving.
Something you can actually do
wait that long. Businesses
tomorrow.
Are crying out for projects to work on right now.
But listen to what he says about his vision, right, of where you should be living. He says a beautiful home is hard to define, but well designed and led by the community is important. Now that sends a shiver down my spine, because I just figure that Keir Starmer's vision of a town and what it should have in it is really quite disturbing. He apparently doesn't like straight roads. According to Starmer, homes must be well designed. He cites variation and roads that aren't all straight. Does that mean, is that some kind of sexual reference?
Bent like his government, some might say.
Exactly. Or sort of filled with diversity. Diversity type
you
houses.
Just imagine sort of Big Brother billboards everywhere, we're watching you. Social credit system where if you put any social media posts we don't like, you won't be able to plug in your electric car.
Well, I imagine a scene similar to sort of the Truman Show, where you're all basically living in this town, which is actually a fake, and that, you open a door there and there's nothing behind it, or look, there's a design made by one of these great architects of the COVID Institute, or maybe they'll put a COVID Institute in, it'll be just these ridiculous things.
Bicycle lanes everywhere.
Bicycle lanes, there'll be no parking, there'll be ULEZ fines for everybody, 20-mile-an-hour zones, speed bumps everywhere. Oh, we've already got all that. It's called London, Maybe a few people running up and down the street stabbing each other, perhaps we could have that.
But there is a good argument to be. I mean, the king is very good on this, and the idea of building, Georgian-type buildings and so forth. This is what's inspired Keir Starmer. I think Keir Starmer should just give the job over to His Majesty.
Well, maybe
Let
he
His
should.
Majesty get on with it, because he does understand the importance of building from local materials and making places nice to live in. But I don't have any trust in Starmer's vision for Britain.
I really don't. No, I mean, Starmerville doesn't inspire me with any great hope, does it? Nansley Dan is the town in Cornwall which King Charles was showing them the other day when Angela Rayner turned up wearing that horse's coat and the brothel creeper shoes, which doesn't inspire me that design is at the very forefront of this particular cabinet's view of the world. But there we are. Rafe, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We've got much more to come over the course of the next few hours. We're going to have some ridiculous new economic figures coming out. We'll see what they're going to be like. The Office of Budget Responsibility has already said basically that Rachel Reeves has run out of money. She hasn't been in a year yet. James Heal's coming up. Justin Urquhart-Stewart will be here as well. Also, we'll talk to Katie Amis, the daughter of Sir David Amis, who's still not particularly happy with the way the government have been behaving and responding to her questions about wanting answers as to what could have happened and what should have happened. Also, Dr. Alan Mendoza's here from the Henry Jackson Society. We'll talk to him about Russia. We'll talk about Israel and the situation in Gaza as well, because this is a big weekend. This is Morning Glory. More after this.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on the far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. The day is upon us. It's Thursday. It is, of course, the 13th of February. Valentine's Day tomorrow. So if you've got any love for anybody, save it until Friday and we'll pass it on. We just had some breaking news. The data for the economy on December 2024 for the last quarter, basically, says UK gross domestic product is estimated to have grown by 0.1% in quarter 4, following no growth in the previous quarter. It's really going well, isn't it? And that would, of course, include the Christmas retail spending spree, which wasn't as good as everybody thought it would be. So in actual fact, it's not really doing terribly well at all. Coming up, James Heal's going to join us, Justin Urquhart-Stewart as well. We'll talk about all the big stories of the day, including, of course, what on earth is going on inside the mind of Keir Starmer. Yeah, he wants to build some towns. I want to hear from you as to what those towns are going to look like, because I can only imagine. There was an exchange yesterday in Parliament at Prime Minister's questions about the Gazan family who apparently are going to be allowed to come to this country because they've got one family member living here who moved here 20 years ago or something like that. That's a very, very interesting story. We're going to be covering all of that. Also, we'll be talking about Russia later on in the hour as well. Vladimir Putin and President Trump agreeing to have peace talks, which are going to kick off somewhere like Saudi Arabia in the next few weeks. Also, we'll be talking to David Amos's daughter, Katie, about Prevent and its failures. And we might even replay that interview we did with Lord Carlile a few weeks ago. Also, we're going to talk about Rachel Reeves and the state of the economy. The OBR headroom has finally disappeared. Basically, there is nothing going on in the Treasury. There is no money. We are skint. It's as simple as that. 0344 499 1000 is the number. And yet another ridiculous immigration story about a woman who joined a Nigerian terrorist group in order to gain access to living in this country. And guess what? She was granted it because she wouldn't be sent home. It'd be too dangerous for her. 0344 499 1000 is the number. It's Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome back to Morning Glory and Talk, of course. We are here all the way through the day with the home of common sense and a whole phalanx of pieces of common sense that we can give to you. Let's talk first of all to Justin Urquhart-Stewart, who's an economist, of course, just like Rachel Reeves, only better, because he actually is a proper economist. He doesn't have to tell a load of lies about it. There were falls in expenditure terms in net trade and gross fixed capital formation for quarter 4, which was offset by a large increase in change in inventories, it says. I have no idea what that means, Justin. Do tell what you make of these figures.
Well, it looks at the last quarter that was going to be pretty flat, coming out 0.1.
Yeah.
So growth, but pretty close to zero.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful with these figures anyway, because the variability on these are really quite significant. Now, the figures actually to look at, and we need some more detail on this, is what's happened in previous quarters. Now, it's quite possible getting some information to say that previous quarters might have actually been improved slightly as better data starts coming through. Now, if that is the case, then that means that we might be seeing a little bit more growth for last year. But certainly at the moment, it's not coming through in terms of confidence as yet. But
also, are we not basically? I mean, we're sort of flatlining, really, aren't we? I mean, it's either minus 0.1 or plus 0.1. They might be rounded it down to minus 0.2. You know, it's just there's not much going on, really.
Yeah, I mean, mine is 0.1 up, 0.1 down. It's virtually flat. There may be some slightly better figures for last year coming through, but either way, you're still not seeing that confidence coming through. Now, what do we have to see to do it? Well, as we've discussed before, actually, it's not a matter of government expenditure. Government actually encouraging expenditure through tax breaks and things like that. We've got the enterprise investment schemes. We could be doing that regionally, focusing on those areas of success, such as those technology centres that we've got. Making sure people are going into getting money into that. Why? Because actually the government will actually make sure they provide guarantees for it. And the great thing about guarantees is they don't have to pay for them until they go wrong. Some will go wrong, some will go right. If they go right, they earn more tax out of it. It's quite positive. So the whole attitude at the moment, where they're trying to get expenditure going up. Well, it's not about government expenditure. Actually, the government shouldn't be spending any more money.
Well, they haven't got any. Well, according to the Office of Budget Responsibility, they haven't got any money at all. The 10 billion that they had as part of the headroom that Rachel Reeves was supposed to have has disappeared.
Yeah, so, don't even go down that track any further. Actually, just go back to the ways that we know work.
Yeah.
If you actually create incentives for actually people to say, right, here you are, here's 50% back to make sure, guarantee that your business, to invest in your business, then fun enough, it'll work. Now, also, instead of actually coming up with ideas such as, well, here's a new idea, a new runway at Heathrow, we've been discussing that for 30 years. Yeah. Or a better railway line between Oxford and Cambridge. That's utterly ridiculous. What you want to have is greater investment in those regional areas. Give it to the regions themselves to actually raise their own capital. It can be looked over to make sure it's checked they're not coming out on ludicrous schemes, but actually to then make sure there's more investment in those technology areas. We see them in Newcastle, we see them in Manchester, and we see them in Ulster as well, in Scotland. All those areas have got some high-tech hubs. They're the ones that need the capital.
Well, here's an idea. Why don't you stop taxing companies quite so much and stop putting up national insurance for their hiring purposes so that they can actually hire some people to do some new things? At the moment, the atmosphere in the business world is very, very doomy and gloomy, isn't it? Nobody's doing anything. Nobody's starting up any new businesses. Nobody's encouraged to put any investment into anything because the economy is going to get worse once April kicks in and everybody ends up having to pay more money in tax.
Oh, absolutely right. So what we don't want to do then is, for heaven's sake, don't tax jobs. Actually encourage jobs to be created. And that means, you can do that by tax incentives. You don't need to spend any money necessarily for that. What you can do, of course, and they have been saying they're trying to make the planning easier, but I'll believe that when I see it. All governments talk about saying they're making planning easier. Nothing actually seems to happen.
No.
But what you can do, though, is certainly then push out more decision-making to the regions, because they're the ones that actually need further investment. And they'll tell you exactly where they need to put more money in. Some of the areas that you need in terms of whether it's infrastructure, such as the dual carriageways going across from Newcastle over towards Carlile, or other areas such as the railways across the northern cities. All those areas where there means some idea, some starting of development there, but not of any particular scale.
Yeah.
So, again, there's no shortage of money in this country. You don't have to use government money.
No. Well, government doesn't have any money. I mean, I'm pained to point this out. There's no government money. I mean, there was an exchange in Parliament yesterday about how much money the police had and about how much money various public sector businesses had. And I mean, incredibly, it was, what's the name, Jess Phillips, who was defending the Treasury, saying, well, where do you think the Treasury get their money from? It's the Treasury's money. And I think it was the Tory on the other side was like, the money comes from the taxpayer. The Treasury doesn't have any money. It's as simple as that.
Treasury has, you're quite right, Treasury has no money. It's our money that they've got. And so far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't be spending any more of our money doing those things. In fact, what they also can be doing, they've got the quantitative easing money, but all that money they borrowed for that.
The borrowed money,
They borrow money, but of course they also own quite a lot of those assets. One of the largest holder of government debt is the government or the Treasury, and so twice a year you get a coupon or a dividend coming through, which will probably earn every year, probably tot up at around about £20 billion. And that's an awful lot of money suddenly coming through. So actually, you could be starting to cross off both sides of the balance sheet there to actually start reducing some of that debt and selling off some of those bonds, which would then actually cross off some of the debt as well. And you start seeing some more positive movement.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
actually,
the bottom line, though, Justin, is that we are not in a good place, and we're not going to be in a good place for quite a long time, right?
But what you can do, though, is change people's attitude in terms of saying, look, let's be constructive and say, here are the positive things, you're right, we're in a bad place now, but we can encourage people by actually saying, let's change some of the rules with regard to, say, house building. Let's actually extend the stamp duty to make sure stamp duty is not going to be paid on whatever number you want to make it, $500,000, extend that another 2 years. Yeah. If you get people spending more money on their houses or moving houses, the kitchen goes, the bathroom goes, everything like that, and they'll start spending money and the government gets more VAT. Good heavens.
Yeah,
it is really
but these are basic economics you've forgotten already, Justin. The economist at the helm here, Rachel Reeves, doesn't have a clue. Thank you very much indeed, though. We've got to run. Justin Urquhart-Stewart there. We need to talk to James Hill, political correspondent at The Spectator. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I mean, we're talking about growth here, of which there isn't any. We're talking about the economy, which Rachel Reeves doesn't seem to understand. But my main focus this morning is going to be on Starmerville. These are the houses in the towns that are going to be built by Keir Starmer, in his own image, I presume. He says he wants to reveal 100 areas across England that have applied to build towns of more than 10,000 people. And he's hoping to get going on it, about a dozen of them in the summer. I mean, I've got this horrible vision of these towns that are built by Labour, which are full of, rainbow crossings and, llama pens and basically, CCTV cameras everywhere, speed bumps, ULEZ zones, cycle lanes. I'm not sure I'd want to live in Starmerville. What about you?
Yes, I mean, I think that, all the jokes write themselves, don't they? I mean, I imagine maybe a fairly grey town, pretty bland surroundings. Yeah. And of course, I'm not sure it would stand for much. But I think, look, obviously, I'm going to say that I think that until we see more of the detail, it's good probably that we're getting finally some new houses built. I'm sceptical, though. Obviously, this is something that's eluded the last 45 years of premiers, etc. So it remains to be seen, actually, how many of these are actually going to get off the ground, and particularly in time so that you see the results by the next election.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk a bit about Prime Minister's questions yesterday, because there seems to be a wide variety of different views as to who did better and who did worse. An awful lot of people say Kemi Badenoch had one of her worst performances ever. I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, there is a problem, I think, with Kemi Badenoch. But Keir Starmer also came out and basically told a flat-out lie about the Gaza story. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I didn't think it was Kemi Badenoch's best PMQs. I think that the difficulty is that if the government comes out at those first of those 6 questions and says, well, we're looking into that, it then makes it more difficult, because then they can come back in every line and go, we're looking into that, we're looking into that. I think that, as you say, Starmer has now faced accusations from Kemi Badenoch of misleading the House over his claim that this was a decision under the last government. Yeah. I think he's very good at the barrister tricks. I think he's getting better. He's very good at sort of obfuscating and dancing around things. And the classic example is the Chagos Islands as well. He was then saying, I'll give you a private briefing. Well, of course, if you take the Privy Council briefing, that will inhibit and bind the hands of Kemi Badenoch, prevent her probably leading an effective attack on this.
Right, exactly right. Let's have a look at what actually happened over this particular story. This is the story about a Gazan family who have apparently won the right to come and live in Britain because they've got a family member who's been here for more than 10 years or so, and so they can all come as well. Check it out.
Mr. Speaker, I've already said the Home Secretary has already got a team working on closing this loophole. We don't need to wait for that. We're getting on with that because we're taking control. They lost control of immigration. We had nearly 1 million people come into this country, had an open borders experiment. On a Monday of this week, they voted against increased powers to deal with those that are running the vile trade of people smuggling. Same old Tories, open borders, empty promises.
Well, I mean, open borders, empty promises could apply equally to Labour as it does to the Conservatives, couldn't it? But, I mean, the bottom line for me is it's one thing to say you've closed the loopholes, another thing to say we're looking at ways of closing the loophole. So it turns out that Starmer alleged that this was something that happened under the Tories. It turned out he was wrong about that. But also, this, we need to keep a close eye on him on this one, because the closing of the loophole might be more difficult than at first it looks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you can say in Kemi Badenoch's defence is that these answers may well be played back to him over the months and years to come. Yeah. Let's not forget, of course, it took many months for the Partygate story, which was led through Parliament, to come out. I think that some Tory MPs, one of them suggested to me, I spoke to yesterday, was like, well, she can be laying traps for the future. And some of these answers about the importance about looking into these issues. And he basically stood up and disowned a large part of his career, actually, yesterday, Keir Starmer did. He stood up and said, well, the law needs to be respectful of Parliament, etc. So, well, that's not exactly what the thrust of his main books. I've read his books in the 1990s, incredibly tedious though they are.
Oh, my God. Somebody had to do it.
Good for a cure for insomnia, Mike. And so I think that will be the thing that kind of gets played back to him. And as you say, Mike, it's one thing to stand up at PMQs and say it. Are you actually going to follow through on closing these loopholes? And of course, let's not forget last week, the Attorney General stood up and said that the ECHR of the UK would never go against it. So there is that question, right? And also, I mean, there's speculation today how long he's going to last in his role, given the eye reports today.
Well, exactly right. I mean, it's all good reshuffles, and the great piece in the Times as well, which reveals that when he did a podcast for the Matrix Chambers, he was even more kind of crazed and left-wing than he is now, talking about, how it's inhumane to even have, closed borders, and that basically orange tyrant Donald Trump is a terrible man, and various other sort of words to that effect. And he also says we owe a moral duty to pay reparations to Commonwealth countries. So, I mean, he's not going to survive, is he? He just can't.
I mean, there was one Labour MP we quoted in The Spectator last week who said that he won't be sure if this is a Labour government until Richard Hermer is sacked. And,
yes.
I think that his very anti-politics, right on stance on lots of these issues, annoying a lot of cabinet colleagues and comes to judicial review. And I also think that, it's clear he's never been an MP. He's the first Attorney General in 100 years with no political experience beforehand. And that clearly shows again and again and again on these different issues.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it shows you once again, if he does go, what terrible judgment the Prime Minister has got. Because, it will be, I'm sorry to go list them all again, Sue Gray, the world's greatest woman, filled with integrity, didn't last the first 100 days that she was supposed to be planning. Then, of course, the Lou Haig, the Transport Secretary, who turned out to be a convicted fraudster. Then Tulip Sadiq, who turned out to have an investigation going on into corruption, despite the fact she was anti-corruption minister. Then Andrew, what's-his-face, just last week, talking about, wanting pensioners to die off before the next election. Then another MP. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on, doesn't it?
And, of course, you've got to remember that Starmer handpicked Hermer, gave him a peerage, gave him a job. He could have chosen anyone to be Attorney General. He chose him. Right. And also Sue Gray as well, who's the ultimate insider. And I think that's two things, one of which Keir Starmer can be sometimes a bit too close to his mate. And the other thing, I hear that from a Labour MP, and the other thing I think is that he's also a little bit blinded. So he thinks, expertise, this is great. Well, actually, sometimes if you're a creature of the establishment, you're going to represent their interests rather than those of your Labour MPs and Labour voters.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, we wait to see the great news coming out this afternoon. Apparently he's going to be announcing something on the home building front, but we shall see. Good to talk to you, James. Thanks very much indeed. Let's get a voice note from Sam on Wokery.
Morning, Mike. Great show. Do you know what? I am fed up with this extremist left woke-aida ideology. It's just infiltrated everywhere and destroying the country from within like a parasite. I'm just so depressed.
I'm sorry I'm laughing. I know if you sound depressed, you do actually sound depressed. I'm terribly sorry, Sam. Maybe Nick can cheer you up. He's got something on Starmar Town.
Morning, Mike. Nick Moore from Loughborough. Oh, my God, I've heard it all now. Starmer's new utopia. He's going to be building Starmergrad, isn't he? Can you imagine the sound of the emergency vehicles in Starmergrad? Oh, here's an ambulance. You know what, Mike, if you didn't laugh, you'd cry. Have a good day.
Brilliant. Starmergrad. Love it. Absolutely right. Chris in Devon says, Mike, how dare that Starmer harmer talk about building new towns? We have a falling birth rate. These towns would be for second and third world immigrants. What mugs does he take us for? We are the taxpayers. I'm on. He is so out of touch. Unbelievable, isn't it? But he thinks that, in his image, he's going to build all these towns, and they'd probably be named after people like the suffragettes or something, won't they? They'd be like old Sakir, Sadiq Khan's overground lines, Windrush Town, Windrush Grad, actually. How about that? That'd be good. Maybe some names. Maybe have some names for some of these new towns. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we're going to speak to Katie Amis, the daughter, of course, of David Amis, Sir David Amis, who was tragically and disgracefully murdered by a mad Islamist terrorist who was let off the hook by Prevent and allowed to walk the earth before he did the damage that he did, wreaking havoc, ruining everybody's life, ruining the family life of the Amis family, and doing untold damage just to the fabric of this great nation of ours. 7:21.
you've got a doctor now saying he doesn't believe in the terms male and female. Biological sex can't be defined, and it's all a nebulous transphobic dog whistle. Now, this is a person until 2022 looked every inch the man he is. He's now shaved off his beard, grown his hair, and is wearing a dress, but he remains male. It's qualified doctors now denying that sex exists, and if a man says he's a woman, he's a woman.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:24. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Big news yesterday. It's on the front pages this morning. It's in all of the papers as well, particularly in most of those places where you think common sense would prevail. We're going to talk now, of course, to Katie Amiss. She's the daughter of Sir David Amiss. Yesterday it was ruled that the government's Prevent scheme made a series of errors in its handling of the man who went on to murder the Conservative MP, Harbour Ali, convicted of Amiss's murder in 2022. Katie's been pushing for answers from this government and answers about Prevent for a very long time. Katie, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on.
No, not at all. I know you've been working an awful lot in the last 24 hours or so. What are you making of what this report says? I mean, it's no great surprise, is it? But is anything going to actually come out of it that's going to be an improvement on things?
Well, Mike, I actually saw this report in March 2024, but was made to sign a contract, say that I wouldn't tell anybody what was in it. Otherwise, I would go to prison or be fined a lot of money. Yeah. So I was silenced. The report that was released yesterday, it's unfortunate to say it's not exactly the same report that I've seen, but obviously I can't tell you what's in the report that I've seen because I'm under contract.
Yes.
So I welcome the release of the report, and I'm glad that everybody can see how absolute nonsense this Prevent scheme is and the utter stupidity of it. However, this is a piece of paper. Not one person to do with the perpetrator was interviewed or to do with his interactions with Prevent and Channel. It was literally a paper exercise where they went through email trails and records that they had. Nobody was actively interviewed. So this is by no stretch of the imagination a substitute for an inquiry. And that is what I am still calling for.
Yeah, and they seem to be very mixed up, this government, about inquiries, don't they? Because they're going to have an inquiry into the Nottingham situation. They're talking about having one into Southport. Why won't they have one into what happened to your father?
Well, exactly. And I tried with the Conservative government. Now I'm trying with the Labour government. Nobody wants to do an inquiry into this. Nobody wants to touch it with a barge pole. And immediately after Southport happened, their Prevent Learning Review was released, and it was confirmed that they would have an inquiry, and rightly so. That is how government should react to these things. What is it in my father's case, 3.5 years later, that they don't want the public knowing? Because had Southport not have happened, they wouldn't have released this Prevent Learning Review.
Right.
We did that because I was made to sign the contract.
Yeah, because it's not as if it's one event. You know, there are several events now that all involve Prevent. And then surely at some point or other, I mean, I had Lord Carlile on my show some weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and he was so pompous and ridiculous that in the end, you know, we ended up having a row. Because he was going, well, the thing about Prevent is it works very well. I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, how can you say it works very well? He said, well, you don't see all of the successes. I know, and so many people have died, and so many people have been put at risk. I mean, Michael Gove's family, Sarah Vine wrote about this yesterday, you know, his ex-wife, who said, you know, it terrifies me to think that he at some point or other may have stalked, you know, Michael Gove and my children and me, and it's only by the grace of God that they didn't get attacked. And it could have, you know, could have meant that he killed even more people. And the idea that some people in this establishment that we call our government and our sort of, you know, so-called, you know, managers of the country, just don't understand the reality of what they're seeing when they're looking at something and thinking it works.
No, and I mean, the inquiry that I'm calling for also needs to extend to Essex Police, because they had a threat the night before and they keep releasing these stupid canned responses about how the threat wasn't related. I'm not saying it was related. What I'm saying is you should have gone to his constituency surgery the next day and he wouldn't be dead, because the guy that did it has admitted that he went to other constituency surgeries with his weapon, saw police presence and turned around. So had they have had the decency to go, he would still be here. If you have an active threat to a member of public or to a politician, you better believe it should be your policy to send somebody to protect them. And they didn't do that. I've been waiting 7 weeks for somebody to get back to me regarding my complaint against them. Finally, I heard back from the IOPC. The letter was addressed to Mr. Amos, so I don't know if that's some kind of a sick joke, telling me that they weren't going to be doing an investigation, but they couldn't tell me why. So now I'm back with Essex Police, and if they think that they're going to just investigate themselves and find themselves not guilty, they have another thing coming. So I've told Cooper she needs to be in on those meetings, then she can see the utter stupidity that I am dealing with.
Katie, listen, I salute your courage and your strength on this, and good luck with it. And we'll keep talking to you until we get something done. Thank you very much indeed. Katie Amos, now you've got to go. Katie Amos, they're very, very sure that something really properly has to be done. Dan Jarvis, the Security Minister, said this yesterday. The reviewer found that from the material reviewed, the assessment in terms of the perpetrators' vulnerabilities was problematic, and this ultimately led to questionable decision-making and suboptimal handling of the case during the time he was engaged with Prevent and Channel. I'll make that easier for you and simpler for you, Dan Jarvis. Here's what you should have said. You should have said, Prevent is not fit for purpose, and we are shutting it down, and we are making sure that the people who are responsible for these oversights and letting these dangerous criminals kill vulnerable members of our society and anyone in our society should mean that this will never happen again. That's what Dan Jarvis should have said. Let's revisit, shall we, the interview that I did with Lord Carlile, because I think it's quite timely to play this. This was, I think, the week before last, when we were talking about not so much the Amos case, but the Southport case. And here's ludicrously what he had to say.
You have to remember that Prevent is a scheme that depends on cooperation, and I find it very difficult to believe that this perpetrator would have cooperated with Prevent. That may be the reason why he was not admitted to the Prevent programme, which is very successful with many people, but not all.
Well, I would have to say that I would disagree with you on that as well, because Prevent is clearly not fit for purpose. Would you not agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that at all.
What exactly has what exactly has been good that Prevent has done?
Prevent has done what it says in the on the tin.
Well, it hasn't prevented anything, has it? It hasn't prevented young children being killed. No, it hasn't prevented young children from being killed. It hasn't prevented the London Bridge attacker from killing people when he came to Fisherman's Hall. You know, it has failed multiple times to protect the British public. So therefore, the word Prevent is not even a suitable moniker for the organisation.
Can I now answer your question?
Please do.
Or whichever question you want me to answer.
Well, you tell me you tell me what successes Prevent has provided us with.
I was about to, but you interrupted me during my
first
sentence.
I'm sorry, you're obviously not used to robust conversations, are you? Well, yeah, because I'm not going to be spoken down to like some kind of child, okay? I don't know who you think you are. Just because you're a lord does not give you the ability to lord it over the rest of the public, okay? So talk to me as an equal, or else you can get lost, frankly.
I thought you were a journalist.
I am a journalist. Yes, I am.
I'm going to answer your question if you'll shut up for a minute.
Go ahead.
Right. Prevent has done a great deal of good. Prevent has prevented large numbers of people from becoming terrorists, but it does not succeed in every case, and you could not expect it to succeed in every case.
Well, you would expect it to succeed in every case, actually. Otherwise, what's the point of calling it Prevent? If it's not called Prevent, then maybe we could get away with it. You could say, maybe prevent some things, you could call it, or prevent one or two things. But no, when you have David Amos, when you have Southport, when you have London Bridge, when you have multiple failures of an organisation, that tells you that the organisation isn't fit for purpose, and that tells you why it's not fit for purpose, because people like Lord Carlile have been running it for such a long time under the delusion that it's all going terribly well. Sometimes the people in this country who think that they are the sort of ruling classes. Really do make you sick, don't they? 7:33. Coming up, we're going to talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza about this story on the refugees from Gaza, whether they can come here or not. Plus, what on earth is going on and what will go on with the talks between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:35. I'm Mike Graham, with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We're asking you for your take on Starmar, Lama Harmer. I mean, it just goes on, doesn't it? Basically, he's wanting to build some towns in this country in his own image, if you like. Paul from Great Yarmouth says, Starmar Town, wow, they would all be like the old Soviet communist style of oversized residential town blocks, with each apartment being the size of a shoebox, probably asking Russia and North Korea the best way forward, and they could supply the workers as well. And well, there is that, and there are quite a few getting in touch on Twitter, or X, I should say, about it as well. One here from Ian, who says, my God, Starmar Town would be the most boring place on the planet. It would have a court, a prison, more police than people, nothing to do, as having fun would be illegal, speaking English would be a crime, and no smoking or drinking. One from James, Starmar bad, the rise of the 15-minute city. One can only imagine the return of 1970s brutalist Soviet architecture, bronze busts of David Lammy and Lisa Nandy, dull grey tower blocks, each with their own managers who watch tenants and check their thinking. Oh, and those racist dogs, probably banned as well. Yes, I would imagine so. Let's talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Alan, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Good piece in the Mail this morning from you. When even Keir Starmer says this decision was wrong, you know this could be a dangerous moment for Britain. This is this remarkable story that was revealed in the Telegraph yesterday about a family from Gaza who have got permission to come and live in Britain because they think they can use the Ukrainian refugee law to kind of come in to join a member of their family. I can't quite work out who's telling the truth here and who's lying.
Well, I mean, it's an extraordinary story. And for a judge to have ruled that you could use the Ukraine family scheme and not be Ukrainian, I mean, it's basic common sense, Mike. It's basic common sense. This is, you know, extraordinary judicial activism suggesting that somebody who has wrongly applied for a scheme should be allowed in anyway. I mean, we all know, everyone listening knows the answer is you applied on the wrong scheme. The answer is no, and yet the answer is yes.
Right.
How does that work?
And also, I'm not sure I trust Keir Starmer, who tried to make out that it was a Tory decision to allow this to happen, when in fact the ruling came out in January of this year. But when he says that, you know, Yvette Cooper's Home Office team is already looking to close the loophole, that's not the same as closing the loophole, is it?
Well, it also doesn't make much sense, because the loophole is the European Convention on Human Rights.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what's been applied here. That's what's been told they can come in anyway under that, on the basis of that, you know, sort of piece of, you know, a treaty that we're part of.
Yes.
So when you say closing the loophole, is that him by the back door suggesting that we're either going to reform or withdraw from the ECHR? If it is, we should know about it full, you know, up front and centre, because that's the loophole that's been used here.
Right. And if you're going to close that loophole, then you might as well close all the other loopholes, like the ones that we've seen in all sorts of other cases, like, you know, the guy with the chicken nuggets and his son, the Pakistani paedophile. We've got this morning a Nigerian woman who joined a terror group in Nigeria, or in London, which is seen as a terror group in Nigeria, in order to stop herself from being sent home.
Yeah, Mike, we've totally lost control of our borders. That much is evident by this. Parliament's will is being ignored. The government, you know, claims it's now got a tough line strategy. If so, it's also being ignored by the courts. Somehow we've got to re-establish the idea of parliamentary sovereignty and what Parliament votes on actually being the law in this country when it comes to issues like immigration that politicians and the public want action on.
Well, exactly right, because otherwise we've got basically government laws and the future of our country being made by immigration sort of lawyers who have become judges and who have clearly been infected by the sort of woke mind virus. And I don't say that lightly. It turns out that this particular guy is the son of a former Guardian writer who consistently writes pro-Palestinian treaties everywhere, and has called the Israeli situation with Palestine as genocide.
Yes, I mean, I don't like visiting the sins of the parents on the children, but this does seem to be a very unfortunate, shall we say, coincidence in this particular case.
Yes.
But the reality is, going back to the main issue here, judges are making the rules now, not politicians. That is not sustainable in a democracy like Britain, where Parliament is supposed to be sovereign.
Yes, exactly right. And also we left the European Union for precisely the reason that we didn't want this kind of thing to be going on. And I know that the old tropes will come out and go, yes, but this has nothing to do with the EU. Well, it's got everything to do with the EU, actually, hasn't it?
Well, it doesn't actually. I mean, it's a different.
No, I know it's a different. Yeah, I know.
EU per se. Lots of other countries are part of it as well. It's not simply.
I know, I get that, but what I'm saying is that it's everything to do with being part of a sort of what you might call a globalist organisation, which tells you as a sovereign country, supposedly sovereign country, how you're supposed to act.
Yeah, and the problem here is, of course, that these things were set up decades ago for very different purposes, and over time. They've overreached in terms of compared to when they were started to what they are now. I mean, the idea that back in the 1950s, European leaders were thinking, oh yes, we'll allow sort of paedophiles to stay in countries because of family life. That just wouldn't have happened, Mike. Come on. No. The idea that was in the mind of leaders who set up the ECHR, it's the birds. So the reality is. These treaties either have to go back to what they originally intended to be for, or we have to leave from them. That's the only option in today's world, where things have moved on dramatically from the world when they were conceived.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Let's talk a bit about the upcoming peace talks about Ukraine between President Trump and Vladimir Putin and their various teams. Donald Trump put out a tweet yesterday using yet again the phrase common sense to solve this particular problem. But he's creating some disquiet here in Europe, isn't he, with people saying, hang on a minute, you can't just go over our heads. What about us? We need to be part of this conversation. What do you make of it all?
Well, it's a little bit chaotic, isn't it? I mean, we're having policy made up day by day, as it seems, at the moment in Washington. Some of it's very good and some of it is less good. And this appears to be one of the less good elements, because to come out of a phone call with Vladimir Putin and then to say, oh, we're going to inform Zelensky of what's happened, we're going to kind of move on in that respect and we'll solve the war in this way, seems to me an extraordinary way to be doing business for a major conflict that's been going on for 3 years, and where Putin, let's not forget, is the aggressor. It would be, like trying to do a deal with, a different aggressor in the 1930s, which did sort of happen in, say, the Munich Agreement, without the people who were being talked about, i.e. the Czechs. being at the table. Now, that is not appropriate in 2025. It is also not appropriate to ignore the other countries who've been part of this great alliance against Russian aggression in this part. So clearly, if we're going to be charitable, we can say, OK, it's an opening salvo, but we need to get to a position very quickly where the US and its allies are on the same page when it comes to what happens next. And of course, that Ukraine is included in those discussions.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at what Donald Trump actually said about the peace deal.
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace.
We will continue to be
I said that was not a good war to go into, and I think they have to make peace. That's what I think.
The difficulty, I suppose, here is that Donald Trump, for a long time, has said that, he's not in favour of war. He doesn't think that war is good for the economy. He doesn't think it's good for business. And he obviously doesn't think it's good for the well-being of the general population. However, people in this country, certainly, in every government that's been in so far since the war's been on, have said that we need to continue to give money to Ukraine, continue to finance the war effort, to make sure that Zelensky wins. So I'm not sure those things will ever come together, will they?
Well, they won't potentially come together, and that's a reality, and everyone, secretly knows that, in the sense that if there is to be a peace deal, then one side or the other won't win, i.e. they won't get everything that they want in this conflict. The key to it, though, is to make sure that Ukraine, the innocent defending party, gets more out of it, much more than Russia, the aggressor. Because if you come out of this war with Russia being able to point to substantial territorial gains on the back of violence and on the back of 3 years of global sanctions and, Russia being a pariah and then being readmitted, if you like, to the international community, well, then you've set the scene, haven't you, Mike, for the next decade of aggressors going, fine, we'll do what he did. It's a short-term loss for a long-term gain. And that is not a message the international community can afford to be sending out.
Yeah, but I guess the other side of that coin is that neither can we continually give money that we don't have to a cause that appears to be not going anywhere.
Well, that cause could go somewhere if he was given all the weapons he's asked for. So, it's a question of, do you want to prosecute this war to the full versus do you not? That's really the binary choice. If you don't, I quite agree with you at that point. You have to, sort of sue for peace and say, look, it's been 3 years, we're not progressing, let's come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
But the base case remains. Russia is an aggressor. If you reward aggressors and give them land and give them, goodies for having done it, all you're going to do is embolden either that aggressor or other aggressors to do the same thing, because they will see the outcome being success in that way. So the choice really is for us to say, OK, if we can negotiate a good peace deal now where Ukraine gets most of what it needs to be back as a major country, then maybe that's a much better alternative than grinding out the war for 3 more years. But the key to it, Mike, is the Ukrainians have to agree with that. And I don't think they're starry-eyed about this. I don't think they think, necessarily they're going to come back with everything that they had in 2014. But I do think, quite rightly, they have a right to expect that a lot of that will come back to them.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch as it unfolds. Dr. Alan Mendoza, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Yesterday, in a tweet that was put out from Donald Trump on Truth Social, he actually said, President Putin even used my very strong campaign motto of common sense. We both believe very strongly in it. We agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. We have also agreed to have our respective teams start negotiations immediately, and we will begin by calling President Zelensky of Ukraine to inform him of the conversation, which is something he then did. It's going to be an interesting thing to see how the Europeans behave here. Let's get a couple of voice notes, though. Paula first on migrants.
Hi, Mike. Great show as always. Paula in Liverpool here. I want to know how all of these immigrants get onto these lefty lawyers. Do the lawyers stand on the shores recruiting them as they come in? I think what we need to do is stop legal aid for anybody who arrives on these shores. It's simply for people who are born and bred here and who have paid taxes or who have legal status here, not for immigrants who want to come in and use our money to sue the government. To be able to stay here on spurious grounds. It's absolutely ridiculous. This country is going to eat itself. Thanks. Keep me sane, please, Mike.
Paula, you're absolutely right. Legal aid should not be available to anybody who just decides to come and break into this country and ask for it. And as to whether or not there are lawyers waiting on the beaches, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we used to call them ambulance-chasing lawyers. They're now dinghy-chasing lawyers. They're probably chasing them down the beach and waiting for them to come off. Here's my card, by the way. Give us a shout. Let's get one from Bridget on Starmar Town.
Morning, Mike. Bridget from France here. With regards to those towns that Stalin wants to build in his own image, what about Starland? How about that? And he'll probably have lots of statues of Lord Ali everywhere. Great show. Have a great day, Mike.
Well, maybe Lord Ali could have a clothes shop. You know, Lord Ali's gear here for Keir. Something like that. This one from someone who doesn't give a name. Mike, welcome to Starmargrad, where all the houses are on the left. Ed Millipede has designed them with one window, and Diane Abacus has done the house numbers 2, 7,933, 9, 3, 6, 1. It's good, isn't it? Starmargrad. What a nightmare. This is Talk.
So the answer is that people just work more efficiently for the 5 days, surely.
But why is it 5 days?
Well, because we kind of need to have some kind of production level. I mean, people have.
But it was 7.
People have coped pretty well with that for the last, more than probably a century, haven't they?
You could say people coped with it being 7 for.
Well, they didn't. I mean, they didn't. They didn't, did they?
I mean, people aren't coping with it being 5 now.
Well, they are. Who isn't coping? I mean, only snowflakes are coping with that, for goodness' sake.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. I bet the Starmar towns are for the Palestinians, says one tweeter. And one's from Mel, who says there should be a collective name for Starmar's new towns. Call them Cloud Cuckooville, because that's as much chance as there is of them being built. Well, there is that problem, isn't there, apparently. Let's talk to Robert Bates, the Research Director of the Centre for Migration Control, because an incredible story today. As if the immigration stories this week haven't been mad enough, Robert. We've had the chicken nuggets boy from Albania. We've had the Pakistani paedophile who can't be sent home because he's got children who he needs to see. We've now got a Nigerian woman who's been here for, 14 years, I think, who's finally been granted the permission to stay after 7 attempts, because she decided to join a terrorist organisation, which meant it would be dangerous for her to return to Nigeria. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up.
No, and the more these cases come out, I think the more the British public are going to find the whole edifice of our human rights law incredibly offensive. These are processes now that clearly aren't designed in any way to actually benefit the British public. They're incredibly expensive and they're actually becoming quite dangerous.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that we've allowed for far too long left-wing judges in the immigration orbit to frankly determine large parts of our immigration policy. And, I think we are really just starting to see the tip of the iceberg of how big this catastrophe has actually been for the country. I think, we've seen 5 or 6 high-profile cases now in recent weeks, but I think we could be going on for months with these stories if we have journalists actually looking into them, because the whole orbit of what these organisations are actually producing is low-grade judgments that do nothing to benefit the British public, but actually just keep rapists, paedophiles, murderers in our country when they should be on the first plane back to the country of origin.
Absolutely right. Because, this particular case is remarkable, because it's almost as though this woman, who for some reason can't be named, I don't know why, but again, it's the upper tribunal judge in a case, unlike it was not Sir Hugo Norton-Taylor this time, it was somebody called Gemma Loughran. Basically, this particular asylum seeker has been through the playbook, if you like, of all the reasons why she should be allowed to stay, failed 7 times, and has finally now been given the right to stay, even though the judge more or less acknowledged that her joining this Biafran sort of terrorist group was done deliberately just so that she could stay here.
Yeah, well, that's it. If you read most of these judgments, you can see the judges kind of umming and ahhing and almost squirming their way towards reaching the conclusion that these individuals aren't fit for deportation. A lot of the time they say that the potential harm that the individual will suffer if they are returned somehow trumps the interest to the British public of removing these individuals. Other times they'll add a vague line, such as these individuals are still eligible for deportation, but not right now. And we all know that effectively means that those people won't be removed anytime soon, and they'll be put up in probably social housing, and they'll be able to stay in the country indefinitely. I think, as well, as you point out, a lot of these judges are not really judges. They're left-wing lawyers that are cosplaying effectively as judges. They've all come from the same circuit. They've all worked for the same law firms. They've all taken on the same clients in the past. And I think that is a huge problem here, in that we have allowed our immigration tribunal system to be effectively hijacked by individuals that aren't coming at this in an impartial manner. They're coming at it from a very, very clear worldview, where they believe that their duty, their crusade, is the fight for human rights and the fight for secure immigration laws. And I think that's why you mentioned Norton-Taylor. I think that's part of the reason why he has reached such ridiculous conclusions in recent months, is because he is coming from a very, very clear background. His father, of course, is an incredibly left-wing individual and a campaigner as well. Right. And you have to wonder, why have we allowed this to happen? Why aren't we actually, either giving the Home Office the final say on these matters, or why aren't we, if we have to have these tribunals, doing a magistrates' court type system where we have 2 individuals from the public given advice by a clerk, but they actually have the final say? At least then we'd have a little bit of common sense injected into proceedings.
Well, it's hard to imagine that anybody would be more left-wing than the Home Office. We seem to have managed to find some judges who actually are, who keep, refusing the appeals of the Home Office and telling the Home Office that they've got it wrong. But it is extraordinary. I mean, I don't know what you make of this. Migrants arriving illegally in the UK in small boats or stowed away in lorries will now be refused British citizenship, according to new Home Office guidance. But again, it's about the exceptions more than the rule, isn't it? The good character guidance for immigration staff has been changed to say that people who have arrived in the UK illegally, having made a dangerous journey, will normally be refused citizenship. I mean, is that going to make any difference?
No, because unfortunately a lot of this is left up to the discretion of individuals. And as you and I both know, that the individuals that work in organisations like the Home Office, again, although the Home Office aren't quite as bad as the judges, still bend the rules. They look around, they try and find any possible reason with which they can justify either an individual that's entered the country illegally being able to stay, or actually then being put on the pathway to citizenship. There was, of course, huge uproar a couple of weeks ago about the suggestion that people entering our country could be given British citizenship under the Labour plans. And it is the Labour plans that have maybe put this in motion and put this back on the table. They've scrapped large parts of the Tories' immigration bills, which would have flat out denied it to anyone that had come into the country illegally. This is now a lot more discretionary, and it is up to caseworkers and the kind of proceedings that take place after they have been granted settled status. So I think, you know, there is still back routes and loopholes that do exist in the system that we could very well see people that have ridden absolute roughshod over our rules and systems still being given the right to become a British citizen, which is an incredibly offensive thing to think about. Someone able to describe themselves as British, having broken our laws, as the very first thing they do in our country. I think it's a grave insult.
Well, exactly right. I mean, that guy, the Albanian who with the chicken nuggets, I mean, he had become British citizen many, many years ago, despite the fact that he came here illegally, that he came here misrepresenting where he came from, that he also committed many, many crimes while he was here. It's none of which stopped him from becoming a citizen. Let me just ask you one final question, Robert. One of our viewers left us a voice note today to say, you know, how do they always get in touch with all these lefty lawyers, and why do all of these asylum seekers get legal aid? I mean, we could stop them getting legal aid, but how is it that they so quickly manage to find lawyers to represent themselves?
Well, it's because you, I, and Paula the caller are having to spend, I think it's £250 million contract is currently in place with a charity, a left-wing charity, to provide round-the-clock advice and guidance and effectively act as a call service for those individuals that are in the asylum system. So they have access to pick up the phone, tap in a number, and you're getting effectively told exactly what you need to do to have the best possible chance to stay in the country.
Yeah, and not just pick up a phone, we'll actually give you a phone so that you can make the call, and we'll probably give you a series of numbers that you can call. I mean, that's probably the basis of it. Robert, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Barry says this morning, Mike, the fact that the country's local and culturally close to Gaza won't take refugees should be a massive alarm call to the UK. Absolutely right. And Mick says Starmar's new town could be called Asylum Town. It could well be. I'm quite liking Starmar grad. I think we're going to go with that. Peter Hitchens coming next. We'll ask him about it. He knows a thing or two about Soviet housing. This is Morning Glory. We'll see you after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oifamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport.
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike
across the UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8. Already we're halfway through the show. The sun is up, but I can't see whether it is because the blinds are down. Now maybe we could have the blinds up, I don't know. Because it is actually the day before Valentine's Day, so we need to be able to see what's going on out there in the big wide world. Blimey, look at that. God, it looks awful. It looks like Starmar because you can't see very far. The mist has kind of settled in onto the skyscrapers of London. We're going to talk about housing this morning because Keir Starmer is going to be announcing his brand new plan to basically build some new towns in this country. 10,000 people are going to be filling these towns, and there's going to be 100 of them across England. They're going to stop the blockers. They're going to take on the NIMBYs. Keir Starmer says by the summer he should have at least 12 that have been located somewhere around and about Britain, certainly mostly in southern England, a couple in the north maybe. But we're asking you what Starmar would actually look like. Some of you have got some very interesting thoughts indeed. What says Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister? A beautiful home is hard to define, but well designed and led by the community. Very important. Well, yes, Peter Hitchens is going to talk to us in a moment. We'll ask him about Starmar because, you know, he's been living in many different places over the course of his wide and varied career, including in Russia. So we'll get his view not only on the Putin-Trump talks, which are upcoming, but also what it's like to live in some political vision of Starmar. You know, but cycle lanes everywhere, speed bumps, lots of CCTV, you know, perhaps a llama pen, you know, Lord Ali might have a clothes shop there. It's very possible. It's all happening. 0344 499 1000. Also, we'll continue to talk about the Nottingham families who are going to get their justice. There's going to be an inquiry into what happened there. How could those poor people, those innocents, have been stabbed by that crazed schizophrenic who should never have been out on the streets? Prevent also coming in for another shellacking this morning. We spoke to Katie Amos in the last hour, the daughter of Sir David Amos, who still wants answers and who has been gagged basically by the government from talking about a report that she has seen. We'll also be talking about the crazy immigration laws that are now stretching to people from Gaza coming into the country because they've got a relative who's lived here for many years. Also, woke is all over. Disney have ditched the woke warnings. It's all happening in America. DEI is dead. But unfortunately, it's still alive and kicking in this country. It's 5 minutes past 8. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Lisa says this, where are we going to site these 12 new towns? As it's Charles' idea, how about on Balmoral Estate? That's the size of the whole of Merseyside, so should be able to get a few round there. Great show. Well, there's plenty of places you could build them. I mean, there's quite a big estate down in the Duchy of Cornwall. You can put a few down there as well. But there's no doubt we need more homes. The problem is Jackie Smith came out the other day, and she's the skills minister, believe it or not, and she said there aren't enough construction workers to actually build these houses in the first place. Let's talk to Peter Hitchens and find out what he makes of it all. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I thought you were just the man to ask about the great leader's vision for Starmar because you spent some time living in Russia, and you probably better than anyone to describe the architecture in some of those towns there.
I don't think we're going to be doing that. Even Keir Starmer isn't going to be doing that. A huge, great concrete slab stretching for miles, impossible to find your way around because all they have to identify them is numbers and then sub-numbers with lifts that don't work. Or in East Germany, favourite trick was to have lifts that didn't stop at all the floors. So if you want to get to your home, you had to go to the floor above or the floor two up and walk down, which is an amazing piece of economic money saving, which I suppose we have to congratulate them on thinking of. But no, this is going to be thousands and thousands of hideous, probably rather badly built box homes, almost certainly on floodplains and areas of the country where people have long known it was foolish to build, which will cause endless trouble in the future. And it's not true to say that we need more homes. It was true to say we need to accommodate the huge numbers of migrants who've been encouraged into the country by Labour and Conservative governments over the past 20 years. And they obviously have to have somewhere to live, and this was the consequence of it. I remember Andrew Green of Migration Watch. Whatever happened to them, you never hear them quoted. Have you noticed this? Migration Watch is a very authoritative body which used to know its stuff, but it's now vanished from the airwaves and been replaced by something called the Migration Observatory, which is a rather different outfit. I've often wondered how that happened. But leaving that aside, this is one of the many consequences of mass immigration, which we have to live with, and it will not be nice. These won't be towns; they'll be housing estates. Towns have curving high streets, ancient churches, long-standing residents, long traditions of how things are done, old grammar schools and stuff of that kind. These will just be masses and masses of featureless houses plonked down in whatever pattern the developers choose, without any character at all. And I feel for the people who are going to have to live in them. But there's nothing good about this, and I refuse to rejoice over it. But it won't be like the Soviets or the Eastern European housing plans, I don't think.
It'll just feel like it, though, won't it?
Even the Labour government wouldn't dare to do that here.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at some of the rather strange sort of lessons that Sir Keir Starmer says he's appeared to have learned from going down to Cornwall with King Charles the other day to see what was going on in that local town, Nanolan, I think it's pronounced. But he apparently said that he favours design principles for the new settlements. He likes the idea of Georgian townhouses and Edwardian mansion blocks as key inspirations. However, they've dropped a requirement for beauty, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, he can like them as much as he likes, but he won't get them because this kind of thing is expensive.
Yeah.
And also, to do it properly, it takes time.
Yeah.
And there's a great rush on. And as I say, I doubt whether many of these things are going to be very well built. And within 50 years or so, a lot of them have to come down again. Actually, the standard of building in this country is extraordinary. In Oxford, where I live, new buildings go up all the time. Yeah. And you can always guarantee that within 6 months, the scaffolding will be up around them again. It's become very noticeable.
And some of the things that used to look modern, I mean, I know this is going to sound like an old fogey talking, but I mean, I sort of shiver when I go past the Barbican every now and again, occasionally in a taxi around the back of St Paul's. It just looks awful, looks hideous, looks like the worst kind of red brick university that you'd have ever seen. I remember going to visit a friend there, or one of my parents' friends when it was first built, who lived there, and thinking, my God, this is amazing. But it looks really awful now.
Well, that was the last great frenzy of great big state building in the 1960s, when people said, okay, stop worrying about planning and what's in your backyard, stop worrying about whether it's beautiful or not. This is what we need. Some people even believe, and they do believe this, you've got to give it to them, they believe that the Barbican and Trellick Tower and places that are beautiful. That's their problem, in my view. But what we are going to get now doesn't even have the sort of heroic ugliness of Trellick Tower or the Barbican. It's just banal and cheap and badly sited and destructive permanently, of course, of countryside which has existed untrammeled for years. And as I say, in many cases will be built on floodplains where we will be watching on television the people living in these houses having to be evacuated from them in the
and as ever with any of these estates that are built, there's never really any thought given to how the drainage is going to work, or how emergency services are going to be accessed, or how doctors' surgeries are going to be built, or schools or anything.
There's thought given to it, but it turns out to be expensive, so it isn't done.
Right.
And this is the whole problem with our water infrastructure. Enormous amounts of work needs to be done so that we stop dumping sewage in rivers and stuff like that. But it isn't done. So we build and build, and we don't supply the infrastructure for it, and then we complain that it doesn't work. It's typical of this country. Our delusions of grandeur prevent us from matching our resources to our needs. And instead we try to do things we are not able to and not equipped to do, while we continue to have this supposed nuclear deterrent, which, when we try to test it, falls into the sea with a loud plop. And because we still imagine that we're a world power, and here's the point, I think you probably want to move on to it as well, the point that one will make, you hear the Defense Secretary say, well, if the Ukrainians have to decide how the how these peace talks pan out because they're the ones fighting. Well, it's not absolutely true that they're the ones fighting, because they couldn't fight if it weren't for the enormous amounts of ammunition and weapons that Western countries have poured into this war to keep it going for the past 3 years.
Well, this is right, and I mean, I was quoting from Ben Wallace earlier, who put a tweet out last night saying that, you know, by far and away the most amount of money that's been spent on this war on the Ukraine side has come from Britain and the European Union, not from America. To which I said to myself, well, yeah, that's probably true. Maybe that's a good reason why it should stop.
Well, quite actually, in what way are we equipped or capable of doing that if we can't even manage our own sewage?
Right.
How have we got all this money to spend on destroying Ukrainian infrastructure or Russian infrastructure or whatever we use when we can't even build our own? There's delusions of grandeur in this. This has nothing to do with whether the war is right or wrong, though I think that it's an act of huge folly myself and the result of some really, really stupid diplomacy over the past 30 years. But leaving that aside, who do we think we are when we simply cannot run our... I would, describing my train journeys into and out of London yesterday, the pathetic nature of them, just the total inability of the railways to run the most simple and basic service of a train going to London from Oxford and a train going to Oxford from London. It's just impossible to sum up how feeble and useless it is, and yet here we are, as I say, posing as a world power and helping to keep a very, very dangerous war going. And my other fear about all this is that, reading what one reads this morning, Donald Trump originally said that he would finish the Ukraine war in 24 hours. He's obviously, for once in his life, taken some advice from someone and found out that that's not going to happen.
Right.
The difficulty he faces is that neither leader really has an interest in the sort of peace that he probably wants to impose. Volodymyr Zelensky, if he conceded territory, and actually said we're not going to seek the pre-2014 borders again, I don't think he would last for more than a month afterwards. He'd be removed from power by the strong nationalist forces and by his rivals, who made it so difficult for him to seek peace back in the sort of 2018 period.
And what do you make of? And what do you make?
And so Putin can't give up his position either, because there are people behind him. In Moscow, people think Putin is terrible, but you wait till you see the sort of ultra-nationalists who would take over from him if he conceded Crimea, or indeed had anything which looked remotely like a defeat to the Russian people in Ukraine. That he's compared with them, he's a liberal Democrat.
Right, but on face value, it looks as though, I mean, I've just been watching Zelensky's reaction to what happened or what's been said, and they all seem to be willing to give it a go, it seems to me. I mean, I know that may sound slightly naive, but if they do get the process started, is there not a chance that that's better than them fighting at some point?
Well, it would be, and I'm not against that. I would dearly love there to be peace in Ukraine. I know these areas. I know the people there. I like them. I feel for them. I think that it's been terrible what's been happening to innocent people in that part of the world for so long, and I long for it to stop because of all the horror that it brings. But negotiation is very difficult once you have done, as we have done on our side, and as Putin has done on his side, once you have fanned the flames of anger about war and have made it a huge issue of principle and idealism, you can't then turn to people and say, well, actually, guys, it wasn't that important after all, let's have a shabby compromise. That's why it took so long to finish the First World War, because of the huge efforts made in the belligerent countries to tell people this was a vital war for freedom and civilization, on both sides, I should say. And then, of course, when they had to eventually have a compromise, it was incredibly politically difficult. And it went on for far longer than it need have done, precisely for that reason. Leaders didn't dare seek peace. So I would love it if it works. I hope it works, that some sort of peace can be obtained, because I'm sick of the sight of destruction and death and maiming and the waste of it, and of the general danger to Europe that it creates. But I wouldn't be too optimistic, because of we have raised the stakes in this very high indeed.
Yeah, and what if the EU and the UK are kind of sidelined in these conversations? Surely NATO won't be, will they?
Well, what is NATO? NATO is basically the United States plus a number of countries which hope that the Americans will defend them in time of trouble, and whether they will or not is another matter altogether. NATO is wholly dominated by the United States, and without it, it wouldn't really be a particularly interesting alliance. So I think that they are already sidelined. If the United States wants something in NATO, it will always get it. The EU... They allowed themselves to be pushed aside by the United States on this whole issue in 2008, the major EU countries, when George W. Bush, who, as you remember, was the diplomatic genius who created the Iraq War, and George W. Bush put forward the plan to offer Ukraine long-term NATO membership and Georgia. There was a lot of dislike of this plan among the major EU countries, but they didn't actually stand up to him. And I would say, as a result, what was already a pretty tricky situation in Central Europe was accelerated into a very dangerous one.
And not a coincidence, then, presumably, that Georgia and Ukraine later got invaded by Russia.
Well, actually, now you've said that, I have to say Georgia was not invaded by Russia. The Georgian government started the war with Russia, but the Tagliavini report commissioned by the European Union came to that conclusion. I'd know this is heresy to say it.
I just remember I'd never heard of South Ossetia before until then.
Well, I had. I'd been there, so there. But I've never been to North Ossetia, so I'm behind some people. But I have been to the.
Not many, I shouldn't think.
That's quite right, but it was an interesting visit. But I can tell you that as I say, the Tagliavini report, Heidi Tagliavini, a very distinguished Swiss diplomat, it looked into it, and it's quite clear that Georgia, under the leadership of Mikhail Saakashvili, started the hostilities on that occasion.
Right.
No, there is a basic problem that in the United States, a particular foreign policy faction has taken control of foreign policy on Russia, and did so really in the Clinton years. And it's a quite aggressive view, which involves an opinion that Russia should not be allowed to rise again as a power ever. And the other view, the more, in my mind, intelligent view, that Russia exists and therefore any European settlement must accommodate that fact, held by particularly George Kennan, the most brilliant American diplomat of the 20th century, has been pushed to one side. It may be that because Donald Trump, I think, is probably quite bored by events in Europe and much more interested by China, it may be that the Kennan view might begin to be heard again in Washington, not because Trump is particularly intelligent, but because it just doesn't suit him to pursue this war any longer. I mean, it is expensive for the United States, and it is a major entanglement. And we know from the past 50 years that the USA does tend to get bored with the interventions it makes. Ask any Vietnamese person.
Yeah, absolutely right.
That doesn't mean they don't do a lot of
behind the scenes stuff. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, listen, it's going to be fascinating. Peter, good to talk to you. We've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens, columnist of the Mail, on Sunday, though, with his views on the Trump-Putin scenario as it's going on. And we'll talk some more about that coming up in a little while. Let's get a voice note from Liam on Starmar Town.
Morning, Mike. Liam from Kent. So he's going to start opening up towns. It gets more and more ridiculous every day. I mean, what are we going to have? Rachel's Rotisserie, Sadiq's sausages, you know, like, can these lot really not come up with something? I mean, I'm really sick of it. I mean, I'm in the meat industry, and every day we're getting stitched up left, right and centre, and all he's doing is going on about making bloody blimmin'. Oh, I've had enough. Anyway, thank you, Mike. Thank you for keeping us all sane, and have a great show.
Liam, thank you very much indeed. Stay strong, man. It's got to be done. We can get there in the end. But yeah, you're right. Imagine there won't be any butchers allowed in Starmar, will there? They'll have to all be just vegan shops only, because they don't really like... He can't seem to make up his mind whether he's a vegan or a vegetarian or a pescatarian, but we know that an awful lot of that lot are in some way vegetarians or vegans. So there'll be no butchers allowed in Starmar, would there? Tom in Merseyside says Starmar will be a grey communist tower block hell that he will move all of the millionaire pensioners and farmers to, so he can redistribute their homes and wealth to migrants and people who can't work due to anxiety. Absolutely right. There'd have to be an anxiety drop-in centre, wouldn't there, in Starmar? It's 21 minutes past 8. Coming up, Wokery is dead in America. Unfortunately, here, it's still going. We'll talk to Noah Hoffman from The Sun.
They are from a politically correct, woke tribe that, thankfully, Donald Trump has closed down in America. And the most interesting reaction, I think, is most people in America, 80% even of Democrats approve of his, for example, saying there's only a man and there's a woman. Yeah. The extraordinary thing about this whole trans thing is it's actually a belief very few people hold, but they've had enormous power for a long time. And unfortunately, they are still in, the Labour Party is still in their grip.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 25 minutes past 8 now. Absolutely, time is of the essence. It's rushing around. Ben from Burnley says, do you think it's likely that Starmar grad will have a farmer's market? Well, yeah, but there won't be any actual profits allowed to be made, because any profits that would be made would be taxed up the wazoo, so they can all be given back to the government. Let's talk to Noah Hoffman, though, political correspondent at The Sun. Today, page 10 in the paper, written by Ashley Armstrong, the business editor. After Trump demolishes USA's diversity industry, will the UK follow suit? This is on the basis that all big American companies now have completely reversed on the idea of DEI, the diversity, equity and inclusion policies that have been the absolute bane of everybody's life for the best part of the last 4 or 5 years. They seem to have got really, really bad. But they've all been done away with. Facebook was first one to fall. All of the big Wall Street banks have gone now. All sorts of places like Google, Facebook, as I say. And you've got, of course, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all the big companies, Accenture. They've all just completely and utterly done away with all of these policies that they've had in place for years, which tells me, Noah, very good morning to you, they can't have actually been that keen on them or believed in them in the first place.
Well, of course they didn't. I mean, it was all just very, very blatant virtue signalling. They were following the direction of the government because in the US at the time, if Joe Biden's administration was very in favour of these types of policies, well, they would be in favour of Joe Biden so that he can sort of set laws and regulations in a way that best suits that company. Not that that necessarily happened, but it was absolutely fake. It was complete virtue signalling. And the moment you get a new president who has views to the complete opposite, they all suddenly change. We all knew that this was fake, but it's just so funny to see it in real time.
It really is. But there's a few sort of hiccups as regards to this side of the Atlantic, because one of the things in Ashley's piece today, she points to global accounting firm Deloitte has told employees in the US to strip their gender pronouns from their emails, he, him, she, her, they, them and all that. But in Britain, apparently, in Deloitte offices, they're keeping them.
So I think the UK has always been different to the US in terms of just how much this culture was adopted. So the US has always, in this space, worked more in extremes than the UK. I don't think we ever reached the point that they did in terms of how far they took this. But equally, now in the other direction, companies aren't retracting as fast because they never went to such an extreme level. So I'm not surprised to see that because it is just a different sort of cultural vibe here.
Yeah. Do you think it won't change here, though? Because somebody put it to me yesterday. I was on Jeremy Carl's show and they said, is it possible that we're kind of 4 years behind on the cycle of DEI, whereby, 4 years ago at the beginning of Biden's administration, they did all this and now people are so fed up with it in America that they voted Donald Trump in. Could we go in that same kind of direction so that we're at the start of that cycle and maybe in 4 years' time we'll be ready to elect reform?
I don't know necessarily if we're at the start. I think we have sort of entered the post-woke era, so to speak. So I think it is on the way out in the same way it is in the US. I just think it never got as intense, and in the same sense, it's never going to retract as much.
Yeah, very possibly so. I mean, I see Piers Morgan's got a new book coming out with HarperCollins. The last one was, Wake Up to this wokery madness that we're living in. He's now declaring woke is dead. in his book, which I think comes out later on this year.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think the whole sad thing is, in my opinion at least, and others can have different views, diversity inclusion to begin with is a noble aim, right? Businesses do better when you've got more different people with different ideas. I'm a meritocracy, right? So I believe the best person should have the job regardless of the color of their skin, their religion, their gender, and more variety, the better. But where it gets, out of control and also counterproductive and also anti-business is when it's mandated. And that's what we saw. It was just taken to absolute extremes. And so I hope, and Ashley mentions this in her piece as well, I hope we don't go too far back in the other direction, in the sense that, people won't even think about offering a woman a job because they think, how can a woman be as good at XYZ as a man? That would be a terrible mistake. But it has gone so far in the other direction that this backlash is, inevitable.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're surely not anywhere near a place where we wouldn't offer a woman a job. I suppose we're more likely to maybe not offer a job to somebody who tells you they're a woman when they're actually not. I mean, maybe that would be not a terrible development if we went down that road. But I
agree with you, Mike.
I was encouraged as well with the story today that Disney is now ditching its woke warnings on its movies, because they even went through this mad period where there were warnings on Dumbo, the cartoon film, because of a group of crows that had stereotypical black voices. Jungle Book slapped with a warning that talks about negative depictions or mistreatment of people or cultures. And they said those stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. Well, apparently they're not wrong now, because now they've taken the warnings off.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was just ridiculous. We live in a big, scary world. Like, when you walk down the street, you're going to see things you don't like. You don't need Disney to tell you that a film is of its time. And I'm sure there are, elements of movies made in the past, whether it's Disney or not, that, perhaps not seen as super sensitive today. But I think humans are smarter than needing, signposting to tell them.
Yeah, exactly right. Everything in a context, I think, is the way we should go. Yeah. Well, I can only look forward to the day that that we get a bit more sort of unwoke, really, to be honest. I mean, wokery is all very well. We've taken some of it. We've gone too far with it, so I think we need to reset it slightly. But good to talk to you, Noah. Thank you very much indeed. Noah Hoffman, political correspondent there at The Sun. Piece on page 10 of The Sun today. Ashley Armstrong, the business editor, writing, can it happen here, basically? Well, should it happen here? Well, of course it should. And in some ways, it's always been the case here at Talk. We are very, very much not woke, and we never will be. However, we do give you lots of opportunities for good things. Now, how about this? How would you fancy winning some money? It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:34. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, at 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here then. Send us a voice note, 0344 499 1000. Got lots of you with things to say about Starmar grad, as we say. What is going to be the actual look of some of these towns that Keir Starmer says he wants to build? 12 very possibly going to be nominated before the summer. They're talking about 10,000 people living in over 100 different communities, if you like, over the course of time. It's on the front page of the Times this morning. We've been asking you for your views, and I think many of them have been very, very funny. Darren says this: considering the new towns are likely to be full of migrants, why not call them free gear, two-tier towns? And Parker has sent me a very funny tweet, which I can't read out, but with some suggested names for some of the towns. Unfortunately, most of them can't be broadcast, but they are very good. One here from Rich in Dudley. I wonder if Starmar grad will have Red Hair Square right in the middle with sentry towers to keep an eye on the prisoners. Sorry, the residents. I mean, it does conjure up all sorts of humour, doesn't it? Basically, what he says is he doesn't like straight roads, apparently. He wants well-designed houses with plenty of variation. Starmer says a beautiful home is hard to define, but well-designed and led by the community. I just see a vision of kind of, you know, rainbow streets and cycle lanes and ULEZ cameras, CCTV, you know, Lord Alley's free gear, closed shop. Let's talk to Paul Champlina, founder of Landlord Action. He's got something to say about this, I'm sure. Paul, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Starmar grad is the preferred name for these places that he wants to build. I mean, obviously, we're being slightly tongue-in-cheek about it, but I do worry that the government is getting as closely involved as this in building projects because, you know, building projects might not be perfect and there might not be the number of construction workers we need to build them. But do we really want the government sort of this closely connected to it?
Actually, I would say most probably yes, Mike, actually, because we've had years and years and decades of poor house building numbers. I mean, last year alone, Mike, there was only 5,995 social houses built. Yeah. So we have a massive problem. I mean, obviously, we know about, obviously, the cost. I mean, the average cost of a property in London is 672 grand alone. But you touched on it, is the skills, the workforce. I mean, the association, the Home Builders Federation have said, I mean, I just took a note of the skills that they need. 20,000 bricklayers, 2,400 plumbers, 8,000 carpenters, 20,000 ground workers, 1,200 tilers, and you know, Starmer's saying, well, we'll get them as apprentices, right, you know, and we're not going to use migrant workers. So that's going to be the biggest challenge, of course. Right. Well, Jackie Smith said just the other day there aren't enough construction workers. She made it very clear and said basically we're going to miss the targets that we've set for ourselves already. Because presumably, I mean, one of Starmer's promises is that he's going to give contracts to developers who will promise to train the people to do the jobs. Now, that sounds to me like it's going to take quite a long time. I've got a tweet here from a guy called John in Derbyshire. He says they're building 500 houses here, and the agent informed me that due to resources and skilled people, it will take 5 years to build 500 houses. Well, that's not quick enough, is it? No, it's not going to happen. It will not happen. I actually agree that the planning laws and cutting out all the NIMBY, fight against applications needs to happen. But obviously we have a growing population, plus 70 million, and I think that they reckon by the end of the decade there's going to be 2 million people on council waitlists. There's 1.3 at the moment, so we have a desperate need of housing. And I understand that there's something like 100 applications have gone in from councils. But the reality is, last year alone, there was only 45% of those councils that actually did any building. Right. So there's been decades and decades of non-building, which is the problem, Mike. And councils are going to say now that they've got no money. They'll say, well, we've had to put the council tax up, but we're basically bankrupt, so we're not going to be making any new building projects either. It's horrendous. The councils are skin. I mean, last year alone in social housing, repair complaints went up 330%. as per the Housing Ombudsman. It's a massive problem. I mean, I've lived and breathed housing, and more so in the private rental sector, Mike, and obviously affordability is a massive issue. But you've just got to look at some of those social housing conditions, and obviously Awab's Law, that poor little boy in Rochdale that died. Yeah. So I'm all for more building, and we need more building, we need more housing. But the reality is you ain't going to build 1.5 million properties in 5 years. That ain't going to happen.
No. And also, where are they going to identify all these 100 areas across England, right? Apparently some of them have applied to build towns of more than 10,000 people. But, you know, London, certainly in the southeast, doesn't really have much room for anything. And there are plenty of places around the country that you could find spaces in, I'm sure. But, you know, people need to also work where the jobs are. So there's no point in building, you know, 10,000 homes or 2,000 homes or 3,000 homes in a place where there isn't any work.
Well, that exactly. But you need infrastructure. You know, it's not just building, it's the infrastructure, it's the businesses. I mean, the businesses and the construction companies have said, one, with regard to the skills force, trying to get people in to actually carry out the work. What's happened, because obviously, you know, the mortgage rates went up, and obviously they're trying to keep inflation down. You've had a lot of, you know, the big 6, big 7, big developers that are land banking, where they're holding on and they're not building. You know, the reality is it's great in principle, but of course you'd have obviously country objection with regard to building on greenfield sites. They're looking at brownfield sites, which are basically sites that have been partly or previously developed, but some of them have pollution on. So it's a massive task. In some respect, you know, we look at what happened under the Tories in 14 years, and how many times did a Prime Minister say we're going to build 300,000 homes in a year? It never ever happened, Mike.
No. Well, Sadiq Khan's currently on notice that he's supposed to be building something like 150,000 houses, and he's only built about 2.
Well, yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me. But I mean, I think with regard to what they were looking at areas around tube stations, transport for London. You know, I get the amount of interviews I've done over the years relating to planning and house building. Yet we need more house building. We need more towns. It's going to take a long time. And I think, you know, in principle, it's great, but it's about practicality and, you know, how many apprentices are actually going into the building trade. I'd like to know that as well, Mike.
Well, that's a good one as well. What about Nansley, Dan? Have you been down there? What do you make of that place?
No, I'm thinking about going there my summer holidays. That's in Cornwall, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I don't know what it's about. I've never been there. I mean, I've seen the other place. I think is it Charlbury or somewhere in Gloucester that was sort of designed by King Charles.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's where they've got the inspiration from. I think it's great. And I think, you know, the quality of our housing, if you think about especially the social housing and the council stock, it's really, really old. And it's actually most probably the worst stock actually in Europe, I've read, actually. So I think you can take inspiration for some of these towns. But, you know, you've had 100 applications from councils. They're going to need government money. Yeah, that's the key, government money. And we'll wait and see. But the problem is, what happens when you have one of these towns popping up near you, and who's going to move to those towns? But I mean, affordability is a big issue, obviously, at the moment.
Well, I get the impression it's all going to look like one big sort of set from the Truman Show, if it's got anything to do with the government. And of course, the government doesn't have any money. They've got our money, and they can spend it. They can borrow money, but they haven't got any money of their own. I mean, Rachel Reeves just put this tweet out this morning, right? For too long, politicians have accepted an economy that has failed working people. I won't. By taking on the blockers to get Britain building, investing in infrastructure and removing barriers to growth, we're going further and faster to get more pounds in people's pockets. I mean, it's just rubbish, isn't it? It's completely
I did an interview on Ian's show about working people, and obviously, you know, I'm a landlord and I represent landlords and that. And the big conversation was, well, landlords aren't working people. Well, they most definitely are. They supply housing. So, look, I'm all for more housing, practicality. Affordability is really, really important. Our stock's really old. You know, the average rent in London alone is like £2,500 a month. So it is an issue, and affordability for renters, first-time buyers, and of course you've got to make sure the interest rates are kept down and inflation's kept down.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to be right in saying and predicting that this is all just pie in the sky, absolute and utter cobblers, and like most of the things that come out of this government's mouth, isn't likely to ever come to fruition. Paul, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Paul Champlina, founder of Landlord Action. Jackie says, does anyone believe any figures on growth or anything else put out by this communist regime governing us? I don't, and believe them to be pure fiction. Can't wait for Plank of the Week. It is good, actually, and it's a Valentine's Day special, so do look out for it on Friday night. Here's one from Glenn in Leeds. Old Sir Keith didn't like straight roads. Makes sense. He doesn't like anything straight, as he can give a straight answer. He can't give a straight answer to a straight question to start with. I bet he will ban right turns at junctions as well. Well, they probably ban cars altogether. Can you imagine? I mean, these people hate cars. They hate car drivers. They hate petrol, they hate diesel, they're talking about net zero every 5 minutes. They are a complete and utter nightmare. And the idea that Starmerville is going to be a place you want to live, or Starmergrad, you know, let's get some more ideas as to what else would be there. Steve says maybe Starmer could build these new towns behind massive walls and offer places of safety to British citizens who'd like to live how we used to live 30 years ago. Well, that's not a bad idea either. And here's one from Steve. It says, I can't wait for the appearance of Milliput, a magical city powered by fairy dust. Cooperstan, a diverse town modelled on the successful experiment that is Rotherham. Don't forget the offshore Lamy and Caicos Islands, where one will be Keir's secret base with swimming pools that slide away so he can launch his Starmer birds with his riveting countdown. 5, 4, you know the drill. Yay, says Stephen Fleetwood. Here's Pete.
Hi Mike, Pete from Bath here. So now we're going to have Starmerville. Can you imagine when the diggers start in the tang? You'll be there going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay! Great show as always, Mike.
Yeah, Starmergrad. Who could have thought it? I mean, what else are they going to come up with? What other rubbish are they going to try and use to distract us from what's actually happening, which is that they're taking this city, this country, and this nation down the gurgler. It's 8:46. Kizzy Schofield coming next.
Article 8 under the European Court of Human Rights is actually a new article that's come about during the life of the court since it was founded. So there's activist judges creating new legislation. In the UK, we've got a cottage industry of human rights lawyers, chief of which is now the Attorney General, who's giving away, you know, the architect behind the Chagos betrayal. We've been stitched up for decades by the left-wing establishment, and, you know, reform will sort this out. Common sense will prevail.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:59. No, it's not. It's 8:59. What are you talking about? 8:49 even. I'll try and get that right. It's Thursday. Come on, I've been doing this for 4 days. Kinsey Schofield's here. Very good morning to you.
Friday Eve.
Yeah, it's Friday Eve. It's almost Valentine's Day.
Yeah, well, I dressed for it.
Are you dressed for Valentine's Day? Very nice.
Course.
Well, I hope you get all of the good things that you can get on Valentine's Day. We got some roses this week for Plank of the Week. Kinsey appears on it for the first time ever, which comes out tomorrow night, of course. Valentine's Day special. We're here, though, to talk about the situation in the United States of America. Obviously, lots of people talking about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin's peace talks, which are about to come up. But let me play you a couple of clips before we go any further on that. Not necessarily on the Russian stuff, but on just the way that Trump has taken the White House by storm and taken the world really by storm. This is Caroline Leavitt, who is fast becoming my favourite ever White House press secretary, because there was a problem apparently from the Associated Press, who refused to call the Gulf of America the Gulf of America. Here's her explanation as to what happened.
If we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the Geographical Identification Name Server, and Apple has recognized that, Google has recognized that, pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America, and it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world.
She's so impressive, isn't she?
She is.
I mean, I know that she's done the job before, and, you know, I found out a little bit more about her because the last time I'd never seen her before. I was like, wow, this woman is so impressive at just answering questions. Because in this country, we're so used to having government officials who are so helpful, unhelpful, who won't ever really answer questions, who won't really give you any kind of, you know, common base of knowledge or anything like that. But she does it just with a very breezy air, and she's swatting people away. I mean, that was about the Associated Press, who apparently continue to call the Gulf of America the Gulf of Mexico.
She understands the assignment. She's fearless, and she's exactly. You know, I actually am surprised it wasn't Carrie Lake. But now seeing her in action, I completely understand because she is incredible, and she has a posture about her and a confidence that there's something so sincere about her and authentic that the previous administration lacked. They reeked of dishonesty.
They did. And the press secretary for Biden really was a dishonest woman.
100%.
Because she made an awful lot of statements which were untrue.
We're not going to pardon Hunter.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, the cognizant tests that Joe Biden's been doing are absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with him. He has a neurologist that comes to see him and he says he's absolutely fine when he clearly wasn't.
Right.
I mean, just ridiculous.
Yeah. So it's a breath of fresh air. I mean, even with the Trump and Putin talks, this is something he promised along the campaign trail. I'm going to free the hostages. I'm going to end wars. And I think that the left is having such a hard time with this because they called this man a Nazi and said he was going to start World War III, and that was never who he was, and he's proving them wrong.
And they hate that even more.
Yes.
You know, and I mean, Keir Starmer in this country is the sort of, you know, our younger version, slightly younger version of Joe Biden. And he's always talking about how they appointed Rachel Reeves as the first woman chancellor. Wasn't it brilliant? You know, young women and girls will look up to her. And she's been a complete disaster, right? So nobody's looking up to her, but they would look up to somebody like Caroline Leavitt because she's a successful, young, you know, brilliant woman.
And a mom and a family woman.
She's got a family. You know, she happens to be a pretty good-looking woman as well, which doesn't do any harm. But the point is that, you know, that's what women want to be inspired by, surely.
And that's why
a successful, clever, smart woman.
And that's why the women of The View sit there and make fun of her wardrobe and are just the pettiest and the nastiest.
This is the Whoopi Goldberg crowd,
yes, isn't it? And they're just so petty. And instead of celebrating somebody that it is is honest, it has a good moral character, and it has been so ambitious. And so far, she has only told us the truth.
Absolutely right. There's another woman that I'm quite impressed with, Pam Bondi. She's the Attorney General. Now, this is another thing that must be upsetting the anti-Trumpers, because, you know, he's a misogynist, he's he sexually assaults women. He's appointed more women, I think, than many presidents have done to very, very senior positions, hasn't he?
He has, yeah, and really fierce women like Pam. I mean, for Pam to sue New York, which a part of me is wondering if it's because New York went after the president.
It may well be. You know, he said he wasn't going to do that, but who can blame him if he is?
Well, they did find a legitimate reason.
Yeah.
You know, to be at this sanctuary space that has become so overwhelmed. Have you seen the amount of people that have fled, really successful people that are fleeing New York to move to the state of Florida?
Yes. Well, I must say, I mean, I was in New York in March of last year, back end of March of last year, and it was very wet, so you couldn't quite see the problems on the street of the homeless but some of the migrant hotels that were being occupied. Knowing what I did know about living there, like in the 90s, I was really shocked to see how New York had changed.
These incredible hotels that have been completely consumed. You know, I do see similarities where if you under the Biden administration, if you snuck into the country, you had a free cell phone, you had better health care than people that were born here. You got to live in a nice 5-star hotel. I mean, it was absolutely ludicrous. And Trump is saying, no more waste. You need to go home. And if you want to live here, you can live here, but you're going to come in legally. And you're going to go through the process. My grandpa's from Canada. He went through the process legally, and thankfully, I'm proud to be an American. But he went through the process, and everybody should. It's the law.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's ridiculous that anybody would fight against that.
It's not rabidly right-wing to want to just protect your own borders. Let's have a look at Pam Bondi announcing that she's suing New York.
New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today. As you know, we sued Illinois, and New York didn't listen. So now you're next. Millions of illegal aliens with violent records have flooded into our communities, bringing violence and deadly drugs with them. And if you don't comply with federal law, we will hold you accountable. We did it to Illinois. Strike one. Strike two is New York. And if you are a state not complying with federal law, you're next. Get ready.
I mean, that's what I call good government, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, it gives people strength, it gives people hope that actually the government's looking after them.
Common sense.
Yeah.
Doesn't it just like blow your mind that anybody would have an issue? I think that it's so funny because from the left, they say that we are the mavericks, that we're the rule breakers, and we roll into town and say, well, actually, we want these immigrants to follow the rules,
the rule of law,
to abide by the law, and we're the jerks for that. It's just,
I know.
It blows your mind.
It is extraordinary. The other thing that's going on in America, we talked about it a little bit on Plank of the Week, is the wokists are on the run as well. We've been talking this morning about how all the big Wall Street companies have just reversed all of their DEI policies and they've just given up on them. Accenture, Deloitte, all these big companies like JP Morgan, Google have done it as well. This morning in the papers here, Disney has apparently ditched all of its woke warnings on its old cartoons. They had one on Dumbo, they had one on Peter Pan, they had one on the Jungle Book. They've just got rid of them all, which tells me that they must not have really believed it in the first place.
Yeah, they were definitely trying to cater to a specific audience, and in doing so, they alienated the base that made them.
Right.
The core family values were out the window, and so families hesitated to invest in them.
Right.
I mean, their prices are also out the roof, and the quality of their films have gone to Hades.
Well, then they try and make Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs without any dwarfs.
Oh, they tried.
Yeah, and then everyone, even the dwarfs were going, well, hang on a minute, this is one of our only sources of work, would you mind not cutting that off for us?
Yeah, there was such a backlash that they had to go reshoot everything, which was millions upon millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So I'm slightly surprised about that shift, but I'm also grateful for it because, again, common sense. How do you alienate the audience that made you, these families, these young children to ensure that you're pandering to a small percentage of individuals.
So a very tiny minority of people who have made a complaint, you know, it's like in this country one person complains about a TV show, you know, and it gets fined, and you kind of go, well, that's not really sensible, because if the majority of people are not stupid, the majority of people can understand that something's comedy, or it's in a context, or it's 25 years old, or it's 40 years old, or it's 100 years old, and it's different.
Right.
You know,
I want that taken off of Gone with the Wind. Okay, it's a pleasant film.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Gone with the Wind more or less disappeared from trace. You weren't even allowed to mention it, right? So maybe this will be the comeback for Gone with the Wind.
Please.
And we can watch it again at Christmas, because we always used to watch it at Christmas, but it hasn't been on for a long time.
You know, my crush on Rhett Butler hasn't gone anywhere, Mike.
Excellent stuff. Well, great to see you, Kinsey. You're going back to America at the weekend.
I know. I'll miss you.
I'll miss you, but it's lovely to see you.
It's so good to see you.
And we'll see Kinsey tomorrow night, Plank of the Week, 7 o'clock. It's out, and you won't want to miss it, because it's a Valentine's Day special. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be speaking to Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. We'll find out what he makes of the zero growth figures that we've got, plus much else besides, and more on Starmar grad as well. See you after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Farmore, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. We are into the final hour of the show, and we have got plenty to do. We're going to be going down to Westminster to talk to Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, of course. We're going to be talking about immigration, still very much number one on the chart right now for us here at Talk. We'll be talking as well, of course, about Donald Trump overnight, basically, or late yesterday, basically saying that he wants to have peace talks with Vladimir Putin. Once again, putting out there front and centre precisely what America wants, precisely what the world wants. Some people on this side of the Atlantic are a bit nervous about it and a bit dubious about whether or not Donald Trump is doing the right thing by cutting out possibly the European Union, by cutting out NATO, by cutting out the UK. You know, the point is, surely anybody with an ounce of common sense knows that what has to happen is that the war has to end, that you cannot continue to have people killing each other. I've got friends in Ukraine. They will say to me that we don't want to give up an inch of our land, and of course they don't. But it may well be that they might have to. And I'm not in any way siding with Russia. I'm not in any way siding with the aggressors here. But what I'm saying is that Donald Trump said it's bad for business to have war. It's bad for the economies of the world, and it's bad for the people of the world. And I think he's absolutely right about that. And if these conversations can start taking place in Saudi Arabia, which is what they're supposed to be doing, then surely that can only be a good thing. And we've also been talking about, of course, Starmar Town, Starmarville, Starmargrad. He wants to build 10,000 people communities in about 12 different parts of Britain, and he wants to start doing it by the summer. I don't think there's any chance of that happening, but I do welcome any more suggestions from you as to what you would put in Starmarville. Would Lord Ali have a free clothes shop, free gear here, stop here for free gear? You could have that. You'd have lots and lots of zebra crossings, which wouldn't be zebra crossings. They'd be llama crossings. You'd have, of course, lots of what you might call rainbow crossings. You'd have lots and lots of houses with windmills outside them, thanks to Ed Millipede, who would want everything to be green. You know, probably regular blackouts in them, because there wouldn't be enough electricity to power all the houses. You know what I'm saying. I need some suggestions from you. 0344 499 1000. And of course, on the immigration front, we've got a Nigerian woman now who's been allowed to stay in this country after 8 previous attempts because she actually joined a terrorist group and so now can't be sent back to Nigeria. Meanwhile, we find out that in terms of being specially skilled to come here, you can be a dog walker, a DJ, or a yoga instructor. And that way, you can get to be here absolutely no problem at all. 0344 499 1000. Oh, yeah, we've got some growth in the economy, but it's not very much. 0.1%. We'll talk to Mel Stride about that. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Claire says, morning, Mike. All of these growth numbers in our 0-0 economy, I really can't see the point. I think that's right. One from, let's see, Deborah in North Yorkshire. Hi, Mike. The perfect solution for the Nigerian woman would have been the Rwanda scheme. While not perfect itself, it's too dangerous to go home of her own doing. Deport her to Rwanda. Well, exactly right. And lots of you got things to say about David Amess and the Prevent inquiry, of course, as well. Yesterday in Parliament, we had Prime Minister's questions, and there was still not much of a difference to be seen between what Kemi Badenoch was saying and what Keir Starmer was saying. She basically accused Starmer of allowing a family from Gaza to come here under the Ukrainian refugee rules, which surely must be wrong. Have a look.
This case has arisen because a Palestinian came to the UK from Gaza in 2007. He is now a British citizen. This is precisely why we need to break the conveyor belt from arriving in the UK to acquiring indefinite leave to remain and then a British passport and now a right to bring 6 family members here as well.
They presided over record high levels of immigration. Reached nearly 1 million. It was a one-nation experiment in open borders. And she was the cheerleader. She was the one campaigning for more people to come and thanking her own side when they supported her campaign. So before she lectures us, I think she needs to reflect on her own record and her own record here.
I mean, it's just like Punch and Judy, really, now, isn't it? You don't really get anywhere. There's not really an awful lot of point to it, to be honest. We're going to come to some more voice notes and some more calls very shortly. First, though, let's go down to Westminster and talk to Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor, right now. Mel, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. We better start off with the growth figures, I suppose. 0.1%, hardly pushing the boat out, really, is it? I mean, this would include, supposedly, everybody doing a lot of Christmas shopping in December.
Yeah, the economy is very flat, Mike, and has been since this government came into office. So you'll recall that during the general election, Labour talked a great game about growth. Once they came into power, I'm afraid they talked the economy down, which extinguished the sort of animal spirits and business confidence. You see that in all those business surveys. And of course, they had this disastrous budget in which they whacked up taxes, particularly on businesses, through national insurance. And I'm afraid we're now reaping the results. In fact, the Bank of England only last week, Mike, downgraded their forecast for growth this year, halving it. And that's the kind of predicament we're in, and that's really not going to be very good news for businesses or millions of people up and down the country when it comes to, you know, their wages, cost of living pressures and unemployment and so on.
No, exactly right. But Rachel Reeves' sort of answer to that OBR announcement coming out saying that basically £10 billion worth of a headroom space had been kind of lost and that she's basically run out of money is to launch a leak inquiry to find out how it managed to get into the public domain.
Well, yeah, it appears, and this is only speculation, of course, that there may have been a leak of the first cut of the OBR's forecast that they would have shared privately with the Treasury, and hence there being a leak inquiry underway. But I think what that tells you, Mike, is that it seems to suggest that what was leaked, if it was leaked, was possibly correct. That being that most, if not all, of the headroom that the Chancellor hitherto has had has simply evaporated. Now, if that is the case, then look, that's on her watch. That's because growth has been, you know, almost non-existent. It's because she's taxed. It's because she's borrowed and spent in the way that Labour governments typically do. I'm afraid it's killing the economy. And if that headroom has gone, Mike, well, that means to your listeners who may be slightly bamboozled by all these arguments about fiscal headroom, it's the real impact is she may well have to come back at the end of March and have even tougher decisions to make around tax and spending as a consequence of her choices on the economy.
I mean, in terms of what she should be doing for the economy to make it move again, you know, obviously I imagine you and I would agree that putting up national insurance in April, which is going to happen, is not going to help. But what would you do? I mean, you're the Shadow Chancellor. I mean, because I mean, if you could pull some levers right now to boost the economy, you know, turbocharge it so that by the beginning of spring, say, we'd actually see some proper growth, what would you do?
Well, she's got herself into a really tight bind, I'm afraid, Mike, because as I'm saying, the next step might be that she's actually got to create some more fiscal space, which, given that growth is virtually non-existent, leads you to tax and spending. So they are difficult choices. But to answer the question more broadly, what the government should have done is firstly taken very different choices on borrowing loads of money, on spending loads of money, which of course is driving up inflation, and on taxation, and certainly not be taxing the living daylights out of businesses. Secondly, they should have had a much clearer plan on productivity. In other words, if the government is spending money, our taxpayers' money, we should make sure that we get efficient outcomes as a result. So going around giving the train drivers 14% and junior doctors 22% and all that money going out the door with no strings attached, no requirement to improve output is completely wrong. And the final thing is welfare, Mike. We're spending far too much. We're forecast to spend even more on long-term sickness benefits, for example. We had a clear plan going to the election to get those costs down, 12 billion a year we would have been saving. That would have spared a huge amount of pain and allowed us to actually invest in growing our economy and getting productivity moving.
So are you saying all she can do now, all that's left for her now, is to put taxes up some more?
I think welfare is an option. Now, the government has been talking about welfare reform and getting people back to work. None of it, frankly, has added up to anything more than words, but we are told that there is shortly to be a further announcement on welfare. So one of the areas that I would be certainly looking at, in fact, we would have done by now as a government, as I've said, if we were in government, is to actually really get to grips with that welfare bill. And that could take some of the pressure off. But you can't get away, Mike, I'm afraid, with the fact that she's already driven the car into the ditch. So I'm afraid this starting point is not a very good one.
Right. Yesterday in Prime Minister's Questions, Kemi Badenoch asked Keir Starmer if he was going to close the loopholes that have allowed a Gazan family to gain access to this country because they've got a relative who's been living here for a long time and who's become a UK citizen, even though they appear to be using the loophole that allows people to come here from Ukraine. Starmer basically was woolly on it, as far as I can tell. He sort of denied being part of any decision-making that was part of the last government's problem. It turned out that wasn't true. It turned out this decision was handed down in January. But he says they're looking at closing the loophole. Doesn't mean he's going to close the loophole, does it?
Well, no. I mean, you know, Kemi, I thought did really well in the Prime Minister's questions, in as much as she pressed him 3 times in 3 questions as to whether he would appeal that court's decision to allow this absurd situation to persist of, as you say, a family from Gaza using the Ukraine route into the UK. Completely the wrong thing to be happening. And on 3 occasions, the Prime Minister failed to confirm that he would even appeal against this judgment. And, you know, this is just typical, I'm afraid, of the approach to issues of our national interest. You know, you think about the Chagos deal, for example. All of this smacks as a government that's not actually on the side of our nation, and that's completely wrong.
It really is. The sound is not great for us, I'm afraid, Mel. We're going to have to let you go, but thank you very much indeed. Mel Stride, MP, Shadow Chancellor there, of course, as well, saying that basically there isn't enough evidence that this government can do anything about growth or to boost our economy whatsoever. But unbelievably, Rachel Reeves has tweeted this just in the last hour or so. For too long, politicians have accepted an economy that has failed working people. I won't. By taking on the blockers to get Britain building, investing in infrastructure and removing barriers to growth, we're going further and faster to get more pounds in people's pockets. I mean, as usual, with all issued government statements, they get ratioed to hell, and almost every single comment underneath that tweet is, you've got to be joking, haven't you? What on earth are you talking about? Let's talk to Phil, who's in Hertfordshire, wants to talk about Starmar Town, or Starmar Grad, if you like. Phil, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning. Mike, I'm just picking up on what you were saying, a couple of things first, with Paul earlier.
Yeah.
About, firstly, was the councils being skint. Well, that's because they're shoving all their money in the green stuff, you know, the green, and it's costing them a fortune. Now, that then moves on to what we're saying.
What are they doing? What exactly are they spending it on then?
Heat pumps.
On what?
Heat pumps.
Heat pumps, okay.
Yeah, they're putting heat pumps in properties that are like 80, 90 years old.
Right. And what, these are like social housing properties?
Yeah, social housing, yeah, expecting them to work.
Yeah.
But then that goes on to what also we were saying about the skills shortage.
Right.
The people putting in these heat pumps, they don't know what on earth they're doing.
Right.
They're not working properly, and therefore the tenants' bills are going through the roof with electricity. But then we're moving on to Starmar Town, because the same installers are going to be going working in Starmar Town.
Right.
But then also we've got a shortage. Another thing that we do is we work in a training college and we train some of these people coming through. And honestly, Mike, it's hard work. Some of them can't even write properly. They can't understand basic, straightforward instructions.
Right.
So how we're going to build Lego Town is going to be a disaster, because it's going to be bad quality.
Yeah. And therefore it won't last, and it'll be built in the wrong place. And I mean, you know, it just be, you can't imagine if the government have got their hands on planning and like this, you can't, I mean, I'm slightly tongue in cheek here, but you know, it's going to be full of rainbow crossings and you know, migrant centres and, you know, places that people can have, you know, an anxiety pods so they can sit there in case they're feeling nervous. You know, it'd be ridiculous, won't it?
It's going to be, it is. It's going to be a disaster. I mean, it's going to be full of things that are bent. You know, for some reason, he don't like erecting straight things.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's going to be mental. I really don't see where this is going to go. But again, Mike, they say we're going to do, whether they do it or not is another thing, and I don't think it'll happen.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I tend to agree. Phil in Hertfordshire, thank you very much indeed. Andrew says this, for the attention of Mike Graham on Starmar Grad, interesting 12 new town names. Starmar Grad 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay! No straight roads, only left turns. Illegal immigrants preferred. No pensioners or waspy women allowed. No farms left within a 100-mile radius. Best chicken McNuggets in the world. Also, probably, as we just heard there from Phil, heat pumps galore. You know, because you'll have these eco-friendly homes, won't you? No doubt they'll have to be built so that they are completely in sort of cahoots with net zero. Reform basically yesterday, by the way, came out with a press conference that said if they get into power in 2029, they will do away with all net zero requirements. And not only that, they will ask for reparations. I know that's not their word, that's my word, from some of the green energy companies for all of the subsidies they were given, which would certainly be a pretty good thing to get a lot of people's votes, I would have thought. It's coming up to 18 minutes past 9. Soon, we're going to talk to Colonel James of Sunderland, former Tory MP, about what's going on between Putin and Donald Trump. Let's get a voice note, though, from Judy.
Hello, it's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. These new towns that Starmer's on about building, I think that they'll all be for bicycles to travelling, no cars, because Ed Miliband will have his nebbing on it. No cars, and you use your Uber to get a rickshaw. How about that? Clean air for everybody. Thank you.
Oh, you can have those rickshaws where you get ripped off in, like we do in London. You know, those things that play music and you sit in them with some fake fur and they charge you 100 quid to go about 100 yards. And it's all run by Albanians. Brilliant. Brad says, morning, Mike. The new town would need a pub called the Crafty Sausage, which would be a free house, of course. Brad in Cambridge. Lisa says, every Starmar grad town should have a statue of Ed Miliband playing the ukulele. They'll probably be pumping out music for you to listen to. Morning, Mike, says Jane. Just picturing Starmer's new build. Will they have nodding Eds on the roof, Richard III style hairdressers and Raider boots? And it will be called Stepford. Very good. I like that a lot. Stepford. What a good name. Starmer grad. Who wants to live there? I don't. 19 minutes past 9.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:22. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. Lots of you have got things to say about statues in Starmar Grad. In these new towns, there will obviously be statues, Keir, Angela and Rachel, says Barbara. And one here from Don in Chelmsford. He says each of these Starmar new towns would have a statue of Starmar in the centre. They could be surrounded by solar panels and wind turbines. Years. What a ridiculous idea. I've just got this vision of the Truman Show, except with a sort of Labour bent. With all roads being bent, by the way, because he doesn't like straight roads. Don't know why. Coming up, we're going to speak about net zero in a moment, because I'm going to ask Andrew Montford about the ridiculousness that we've just heard from Phil in Hertfordshire, who was telling us basically the reason the councils are running out of money is they're spending it all on putting in heat pumps into social housing. And they're not even doing it right. But let's talk to Colonel James Sunderland now, former Tory MP, also former military man as well, because we've got a lot to talk about in terms of the coming days. We've got Donald Trump yesterday announcing to the world that Vladimir Putin and he had agreed on some kind of common sense solution to the war in Ukraine. They're going to start having talks in Saudi Arabia with both of their teams getting together. Donald Trump's also promised to visit Russia. He's also said that Vladimir Putin will visit the United States of America. There's a bit of disquiet in Europe about the whole idea. Let's find out from Colonel James Sunderland whether he thinks it's a step in the right direction. James, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. It's a very fair question about whether it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
What I would say, of course, is that any efforts to stop the fighting and to stop this awful loss of life, both in Gaza and, of course, in Ukraine, is to be lauded. But my point is that there could be a cost involved.
Yes. I mean, I suppose the cost is less important than the solution in a way, isn't it? Because at the moment, one of the things that certainly a lot of my listeners and viewers are concerned about is the ongoing cost in Ukraine, given that, we're constantly being told by the Prime Minister we don't have any money, and then suddenly pops up in Kiev handing out sort of £3 billion more to Vladimir Zelensky for a war which appears to be not really going anywhere.
It goes back to the old adage of what it is you want. I mean, ultimately, NATO is pretty much aligned with Ukraine at the moment. It's clear that the Russian invasion hasn't gone well for Russia. They've lost 100,000 troops or more. The figures are quite hard to deduce, but quite clearly there's now a stalemate there where the parties involved effectively want to stop the fighting. But the issue is, what will be the price that Ukraine has to pay for a deal with Putin? And now that Trump is on the scene, of course, we've got a bromance going on again between the White House and the Kremlin. And who knows what Trump will promise. But ultimately, he does have the levers of power because he is funding the vast majority of the war effort in Ukraine. And that funding could be pulled at any time.
Yeah, true. And I mean, one of the things that people have said is that Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainians don't want to give up 1 inch of the land that the Russians want. But he's given some quite, I would say, encouraging words, at least. I mean, he hasn't dismissed this out of hand. He said he's had a good conversation with Donald Trump, and he knows that Donald Trump and hopefully America will have enough firepower or power in general to convince Putin to just put a zip on it and calm down.
There's so much in that, Mike, but it's not an easy one to get your head around. I think the point is this: quite clearly, giving up territory to the east of Ukraine might be the price that has to be paid for the war to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, the toll on military personnel, on finances, on families, on infrastructure has been astronomical. But what next? Let's suppose for 1 second that Trump manages to convince Putin to stop the fighting. Let's imagine for 1 second that Zelensky agrees to relinquish some of the territory that he's got. That will be very divisive within NATO, very divisive within Ukraine. It'll be a real problem for Ukrainian politicians. And of course, that gives Russia an opportunity perhaps to regroup, to rearm. The ceasefire will be good for Russia. And then what next? Do we have shades of the late 1930s potentially, with Putin simply able to rearm his forces before a much bigger invasion further west?
Yeah. I mean, obviously that is a risk. Also, Peter Hitchens and I were speaking about this earlier, and he said, the problem for both Putin and Zelensky is that they have big, huge nationalist kind of figures behind them who might not be happy with a deal that's done just because Donald Trump wants a deal to be done, i.e. Zelensky could be removed from office if he does a deal that the nationalists don't like, and in the same way Putin might find himself the victim of a coup of some kind by people who are not happy with him doing a deal as well. So there's all of that on another level.
Agreed, but of course Putin's still there. I mean, you look at the cost to Russia so far, you look at the death toll, you look at how the families and the media have been silenced over the last 2-3 years. I mean, this is the grip of power, and Putin has that grip. It's a very draconian, very imposing, very foreboding regime where Putin absolutely is an autocrat and a dictator. So I think the chances of Putin being removed from power, as much as we might want it to happen, are actually quite slim. And my fear is that Russia will only embolden itself and become more powerful with a deal to seize territory to the east of Ukraine.
Yeah, and obviously the other big story that's going to get bigger this weekend is what's going to happen in the Middle East. We've got already noises being made by Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government that, you know, they will go full tilt back into war and open the gates of hell, I think are their words, if the hostages are not released. Donald Trump issued a new ultimatum after Hamas said that they weren't going to release the hostages this weekend. He's saying you release all of them or all hell will break loose. What do you think is going to happen?
Interesting one. And I think that there was a psychological moment when the 3 Israeli hostages were released this week. Their look of emaciation, they didn't look well at all. I think there was a sense of outrage and indignation as to what the Israeli people saw then. It's reasonable to assume that the 76 hostages that are still there in a similar state and actually Israel are being played, in my view. I think that the cost to Israel for releasing these hostages is very, very, very high. That ratio between Palestinians and Israelis is clearly bonkers. And I think ultimately Netanyahu means business. I think he is absolutely serious that if the hostages aren't released by Saturday, all hell will break loose. And I suspect that Trump will support him as well. But I mean, if you look at the state of Gaza, you look at, it's just a concrete jungle now. It's dreadful. The price there, the cost to humanity has been huge. But I don't think the Israelis are mucking about.
No, I don't think they are. But I guess like you were just saying then, what happens next if there is a deal done that everybody agrees with in Ukraine? If all hell does break loose or is let loose on Saturday after midday, what happens next?
Well, my personal view is that Israel's looking for an excuse. I think Israel doesn't need much of an excuse, perhaps, to finish the job. I mean, Israel has not met its overall aim of completely defeating and destroying Hamas in Gaza. They're still there. So for Israel, there's more to do. And I suspect that, the issue with the hostages and the sort of the peace talks that haven't gone quite so well, I suspect that could be the lever, that could be the excuse that Israel needs to continue the war effort.
Yeah. I mean, the other problem, I suppose, for Hamas is that, they've kind of, for the first time really in this terrible conflict, have kind of kiboshed their own PR, haven't they? Because that release of those 3 emaciated, very, very ill-looking hostages actually made people who would perhaps not have been as sympathetic to the Israeli side of the argument suddenly go, maybe this is something that needs to stop. I mean, unbelievable that they wouldn't have thought that in the first place. But, to see what they could do to people and to see also the dreadful way that they've propagandised the release of every hostage that they've released with these characters with their, their green bandanas around their heads and their covered faces and, men wearing uniforms that they were too frightened to wear when the Israeli forces were in Gaza in case they got shot dead. It's a pretty unsavoury kind of scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, wherever you sit on that political divide in the Middle East, whether you favour Israel or you favour Palestine, wherever you sit, world opinion right now is not with the Palestinian people. No. It's not with Hamas. Clearly, huge sympathy for the Palestinians caught up in Gaza. It is their home, and I think that the humanitarian atrocities have been quite something. But the point is, Hamas is nobody's friend, and I think even the Arab nations themselves are drawing a line between, their own political views and Hamas. You look at the efforts to try and convince Jordan and Egypt to take more Palestinians, they're not budging. So actually, I suspect right now that Hamas are completely isolated internationally, and I think that Israel will now want to finish the job.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see. Thank you very much indeed. James Sunderland, former Tory MP and military man there, talking about what could happen at this very, very crucial weekend. It's hard to see anybody seeing sense from the side in Palestine. It's hard to see Hamas suddenly seeing sense, but you can only hope that they do see sense and release absolutely every single one of the hostages. We don't even really know how many of them are still left alive, which is a shocking state of affairs as well. GB says this: I'd much rather have Trumpland than Starmar. Give me casinos, water parks, fabulous hotels and Celine Dion over wind parks, trans drop-in centres and looted shops any day of the week. I think that's fine. All of it's fine, apart from Celine Dion, perhaps. Starmar grad, I wonder who might possibly get the energy contract to supply the electricity. And here's one from Glenn, who says, Glenn here from Newquay. I live near Nansledon. It is Starmar personified. 37 pages of things you can and can't do, from not hanging washing out to what to do with your pets. The place is soulless. Well, you wouldn't want that, would you? Has that got something to do with old King Charles, then? You're not allowed to hang washing out. What's it got to do with him? Morning, Mike, says Mike, on the PREVENT scheme. Regarding this PREVENT scheme, I'd consider it absolutely useless for one simple reason. The system relies on participation, yet it would be very easy for the people involved to game the system and tell whoever is in charge what they want to hear. It never changes minds. It's just one big game. And it's a very expensive game as well, by the way. We'll hear from Katie Amos. We spoke to her earlier on today, and we'll hear from what she had to say about the death of her father, the murder, I should say, of her father, Sir David Amos, by somebody who, once again, managed to sidestep the PREVENT organisation because they didn't think he was dangerous. Well, well, well. We've got another 15-20 minutes to go. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here, of course, to tell us what's coming up after 10. But here's a chance for you to win some money. It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:37. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through. I've got a little rhyme here for you from John, who says, there is a chancellor called Reeves, from the people the money she thieves. I promise the economy will grow. I'm an economist, don't you know? Infrastructure, new homes galore, new runway, new trains and more. No new taxes, I promise. I prefer to borrow. Spend today and pay back tomorrow. Very good, John. Thank you very much indeed. Morning, Mike. All of these growth numbers in our net zero economy, I can't really see the point. Yeah, I know. Isn't it ridiculous? Absolutely bonkers. Let's talk now to Andrew Montford, Director of Net Zero Watch, because there's plenty to talk about this morning, as you might expect. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I've been talking to people about this new cities plan that, or towns, if you like, that Keir Starmer's got. I'm calling it Starmer Grad. That if these towns were indeed erected in 10 different parts of the country, or possibly 100 different parts of the country, you can just imagine how awful they would be, filled with windmills and, you know, heat pumps and all the rest of it. But apropos of that, somebody rang in who I think works in the area, talking about a lot of the money that councils are spending right now on installing heat pumps in social housing, which I kind of didn't know. I mean, you may know more about this than I do, but seemingly they're spending an awful lot of money on a sort of compulsory installation into sort of 80 and 90-year-old homes of heat pumps that don't really work very well in them.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of the heat pump, as I think you and I both know, Mike, is very high compared to a gas boiler.
Yeah.
So what they're doing then is they are the councils are installing very expensive kit, which will deliver more expensive heating bills going forward. This is a win for nobody except the heat pump manufacturers, really. Right. So, yeah, that's a huge problem.
That one is one huge problem. The government's also announced new investment aimed at supporting clean energy manufacturing and skilled jobs, although we learned today from the Telegraph that a skilled job includes somebody who might be a dog walker or a DJ, so not quite sure what skilled jobs they're actually going to be bankrolling here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This has been something that has been going on for many years. The idea of, you know, we get this thing about green jobs, don't we? And I remember there was a study some years ago which looked at what the government definition of a green job was, and they discovered it included things like bus driver. I mean, it's just, yes. You know, they make these things up as they go along.
And then they can just tick a box and go, oh, look, we've got 55,000 skilled workers. And you go, well, really? Have you? Actually, you haven't, have you? This is the point, isn't it? This is the problem with all of this, you know, net zero madness. And I can't quite link up the two thoughts, really. You know, on the one hand, you've got the Labour government saying they're going to reopen the Rosebank oil field. They're going to start drilling for fossil fuels. And at the same time, Ed Miliband saying, oh, yeah, we can have a third runway at Heathrow because it will be very biodiverse in terms of the fuel that they use, and it'll actually be better for the air in the surrounding parts of London. You know, they're not actually making any sense. I mean, they're making even less sense now when they talked about, you know, completely changing over to electric cars and electric planes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are completely divided on the net zero issue. And so we're getting this mixed messaging. I think we'll see in coming months that, if you like, the more rational sides of both parties will win out, because the economy so desperately needs growth that the green nutters, if you like, are going to have to take a back seat. The thing that struck me in recent in the last 24 hours is this new this press conference that Reform did.
Yes, I was coming to that.
Yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it? Reform are saying that they are going to essentially that they're going to claw back subsidies from wind farms, which I thought was it's really important, because it could completely destroy investor confidence in renewables. If we do that, then essentially the whole renewables bandwagon grinds to a halt.
Right.
Which I think is really good and really important. Now, what that will mean is that potentially in a few years' time, our bills will stop going up, which will be very nice indeed. So, you know, Reform may have done the country a great service there.
So you think that this might make some of these green energy companies sort of take a double step and go, hang on a minute, maybe we shouldn't be investing as much money as we're about to, because we might have to give a load of it back. I mean, Richard Tice yesterday basically said that net zero policies are solely to blame for higher energy bills and deindustrialisation in the United Kingdom, and it's all a massive con. He and I have had these conversations many times. I completely agree with him. And not only will they claw stuff back, but they will basically completely and utterly scrap all of the targets. And I did, this is just to prove that I'm quite a boring individual at times. I was driving through the Rotherhithe Tunnel last weekend, and I thought as a sort of as a piece of research, which I could then report the next time we talked about this, I counted the cars coming the other way, and I counted about 110 cars, something like that, and only about 6 of them were electric. And that's in London, where many people are much more green than they are in other parts of the country. So if you take that as I know it's a very small sample, it's just one individual situation, 6% of cars are green is what that tells me. So, I mean, if people are now working out that if they've got an electric car, they're going to be paying more in tax, they're going to be paying more in duty, and it's not very green anyway. I think the green car sort of electric car revolution is over.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it probably is, actually. You can see it grinding to a halt already. You know, the price for second-hand EVs has fallen through the floor because nobody wants them.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't think the country can afford to go on expanding EVs. I think, EVs, have been a toy for rich people, and the number of rich people in the country is declining quite rapidly. So the market for EVs is declining too. So I think that will grind to a halt too. We really need people to get serious about net zero policy. The thing I found refreshing about the reform press conference was that there was no pandering to the green blob, and all politicians pander to the green blob, and that has to stop.
Yes. Well, I had Nigel Huddleston on this week, the Tory MP, and I said to him, and he was talking about, returning to proper conservatism under Kemi Badenoch and forming a proper opposition, coming back at Labour with a full-strength team. And I said, oh, good. So does that mean you're going to give up on your net zero commitments? And he was very woolly about it, and he wouldn't say that he would. And that's the problem.
I mean, again, this comes back to the divided party, doesn't it? People don't want to step out of line on this because, they might upset the other wing of the party. So it's safer to be woolly or to say nothing at all. That has to stop. I think any party that wants to be successful at the next election has to take a firm stand on this. I think parties, the Conservative Party are going to have to face down the Conservative Environment Network, the grouping of green-minded MPs, and just say, guys, be quiet, leave and join the Liberal Democrats if that's what you want to do, but we are now going to adopt a rational energy policy. That's the only way we're going to save the country.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Andrew, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Andrew Montford, the Director of Net Zero Watch. Wouldn't that be brilliant if Reform get in and they just did away with all of it? Completely. And also, what might be also interesting is the fact that if, in fact, the reform policy and prediction of what they would do has a chilling effect on the net zero companies that are now trying to milk a load of money out of the government, that would also be rather good. Brad in Cambridge says one of the new towns would be called Transylvania, with a retirement home called Over the Rainbow. Very good. And this is great from Dave in Coventry. Because Starmar has no personality or imagination here are some ideas for naming his new towns. Libchester, Wettington, Wokefield, which I think is my favourite, or Marxist Harborough. Brilliant. Coming up, we're going to hear from Casey Amis on that Prevent report. We spoke to her a little bit earlier today. We'll take some of your calls as well, and more on Starmar Grad. This is Talk.
as government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 10 minutes till 10. We are very nearly out of the door. We've got Julie Hartley-Brewer coming. It looks a bit grey out there. Valentine's Day tomorrow, of course. There might be some sunshine for that. This one from Rich in London. Mike, Starmar grad will be alcohol-free, smoke-free, meat-free, and a checkpoint to get in and out. The first thing you'll see will be a huge statue of Starmar saying, "Welcome, comrades." Yeah, I know what you mean. Let's talk to David in Gloucestershire on Prevent. Let's hear what he's got to say. David, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are we?
Very well indeed. What can I do for you, sir?
Well, I had to ring your producer this morning and basically tell you the story. So I'm blind, and I get involved with a blind group up here in the Forest of Dean. And basically, we had a pottery class. This was before Christmas.
Yeah.
And obviously, due to funding, you have to fill out all the forms for the council, etc.
Right.
And one of the things was, are we aware of Prevent? Do we know what Prevent does? Is there anybody that should be aware of Prevent? You know, bearing in mind, most of us are blind. Some of us have got hearing difficulties.
Right.
Most of them are pensioners. You know.
And who's giving you this reference then? Is it the council?
Well, it comes from the council for the funding, because obviously there was a teacher came out from one of the, you know, to help us all.
Right.
But it was just, you know, without filling out the forms and everything, we weren't going to get the funding.
Right.
You know, and it was just like, are you for real, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and I was joking with one of my friends, and, you know, bearing in mind she's in her 70s, and, you know, and I said, "Oh, do you know how to make a bomb?" And I said, and she says, "No, I don't." I said, "Oh, perhaps I better not say that."
You probably shouldn't. No, you probably get absolutely dragged down to the local constabulary police station and beaten with a rubber hose. But it's mad, isn't it? It just shows you what they're not doing, and what they are doing.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Just
ridiculous.
Crazy, just missing a point to my point, you know. They're not going after the right people, you know.
No, clearly. Well, they want to look in the wrong places in case they find the right people in the right places, I think, David. Thanks very much indeed for that. Just on the subject of Prevent, and that is ludicrous, isn't it? Earlier on today, we interviewed Katie Amos, who is, of course, the daughter of Sir David Amos, the Southend MP, who was murdered by a crazed Islamist who stalked, by the way, several other MPs and who thought at one point of attacking several other constituency MPs' offices, but was put off because there was police on the door. Let's have a look at what Katie had to say.
I welcome the release of the report, and I'm glad that everybody can see how absolute nonsense this Prevent scheme is and the utter stupidity of it. However, this is a piece of paper. Not one person to do with the perpetrator was interviewed or to do with his interactions with Prevent and Channel. It was literally a paper exercise where they went through email trails and records that they had. Nobody was actively interviewed. So this is by no stretch of the imagination a substitute for an inquiry. What is it in my father's case 3.5 years later that they don't want the public knowing? Because had Southport not have happened, they wouldn't have released this Prevent Learning Review.
Right.
The inquiry that I'm calling for also needs to extend to Essex Police, because they had a threat the night before and they keep releasing these stupid canned responses about how the threat wasn't related. I'm not saying it was related. What I'm saying is you should have gone to his constituency surgery the next day and he would have to be dead because the guy that did it has admitted that he went to other constituency surgeries with his weapon, saw police presence and turned around.
Yeah.
So had they have had the decency to go, he would still be here. If you have an active threat to a member of public or to a politician, you better believe it should be your policy to send somebody to protect them. And they didn't do that. I've been waiting 7 weeks for somebody to get back to me regarding my complaint against them. Finally, I heard back from the IOPC. The letter was addressed to Mr. Amos, so I don't know if that's some kind of a sick joke, telling me that they weren't going to be doing an investigation, but they couldn't tell me why. So now I'm back with Essex Police, and if they think that they're going to just investigate themselves and find themselves not guilty, they have another thing coming.
Yeah.
So I've told Cooper she needs to be in on those meetings, then she can see the utter stupidity that I am dealing with.
Katie Amos there, a very brave woman, talking about her quest to try and get some sense, and not out of just the government and the prevent people, but also out of the Essex Police. And she's not going to stop until they do it. We'll come to Matthew in a moment. He's on the phone, wants to talk about net zero. One from Dave in Aberdeen. He says, an inquiry into David Amos won't sadly change anything. It's just as if the government goes to the files and documents page and just prints off the same excuse. Well, we have to keep pressing them on it, though, because they need to find proper answers for the family. Tony in Barrow says this: Mike, the David Amos murderer was seeing other MPs, but when I try to send a minister an email, they will not respond, as he is not my MP, even though he is the minister. So how did he get appointments? Well, that's a very good question. I don't know how easy that is to do, and I would imagine after what happened to David Amos that the appointment procedure was tightened up. But of course, one of the things that went really, really wrong after that awful murder was that the Speaker of the House, I remember, got up into the House of Commons and started saying we all have to be nicer to each other, as if this crazed killer had been somehow snubbed or insulted on social media. No, he was a crazed killer, absolutely and utterly radicalised by Islamic fundamentalism, and that was why he did the killing. And that's the point of all of this. And people have to start admitting what's actually going on. Just on the green front, Barbara says our council replaced their vans with electric vans, but they can only be charged at the council offices, which could be 40 miles away from where they're working. Genius. Let's talk to Matthew. He's got something to say on net zero. Matthew, very good morning to you.
Morning, Graham.
Thank
Great
you.
Show.
You can call me Mike if you want.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Brilliant.
People do it all the time.
Anyway, Mike.
Go on.
So basically, my mum got the call from the council to have a heat pump fitted, the solar panels, and double glazing.
Right.
Basically, my mum didn't want the heat pump, so they pretty much tried to bully her into having the heat pump, because otherwise you couldn't get the other parts.
Right.
So the solar and the double glazing, which actually was going to be triple glazing, which doesn't do anything anyway.
No.
It's a complete waste of time.
And so were they offering her all this for free then?
Yeah, because they basically said it's a government grant, which basically means me and you are paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no such thing as a free heat pump.
Nothing's free, yeah. So eventually they gave in because they wanted to get the rest of it on. So they said, okay, you don't have to have the heat pump, but we'll do the solar panels and we'll do the windows. But someone actually came round to assess the windows, which I fitted myself in the council house because they wouldn't put double glazing in years ago.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with them. That even the chap that came round said, nothing wrong with these double glazed units, they won't have to change these. Then all of a sudden she gets a letter saying they're putting the windows in. So it's a complete waste of money.
That's ridiculous.
A scaffold gone up to put them in as well, which all brand new scaffolding, looked like a brand new company that had been set up, probably that someone in the government owns, let's face it.
Yeah, probably.
And to be fair, the double glazing is good, and the solar panels are really doing a good job. But it's just what a waste of money.
But what a waste of money! And I mean, multiply it by I don't know how many, couple of million. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, and then I tried to get. I went, well, if it's a government grant, I'll get the solar panels on my roof. Rung them up, went through it all. Basically, when it got through to someone ringing me up, they said, "Oh yeah, you can't have it because you earn too much money." I said, well, who can get this then? Well, if you're on benefits. And I was like, what?
And that's it. So if you're on benefits, you get free solar panels. It's unbelievable. Yeah. We undercover this stuff.
You're in a council house.
Yeah, incredible. Matthew, great. Thank you very much for informing us of that. Here's one from Mark in Enfield. He says, in a new town called Starmar, the butcher's shop would give out free sausages. Also, the charity shop would do a line of shawadi-wadi cast-off clothes. Thank you very much indeed. And one finally from Jane Coventry. I'm buying number 54321 Chagos Archipelago Street, and I'm being paid £1 £1.3 million to take it. Julia Hartley-Brewer's here.
It'd be vegan sausages.
Starmar stand. Can you
Vegan
imagine?
sausages.
Starmar
I want
grad.
to know, though, would there be a toolmaker's factory?
They'd have to be. There's a free shop so you get free clothes from Lord Alley. And Specsavers won't cost any money either. I mean, this is a real scandal.
Up your £5 suits.
This scandal I've just uncovered. People in homes being given free.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well if you're
solar
low
panels.
income, then you get
But you get them on benefits.
Yeah.
Free.
Yeah.
I mean, no wonder the councils haven't got any money.
No. It's all mad.
Crikey.
It's all mad.
I mean, I'm not very easily shocked.
The
I'm
world
actually
is
shocked.
completely mad. That's why people are here listening to us.
Yeah.
Try and make some sense of the